The male protagonist, Ki Seon-yeon, is a track and field athlete. His father is a member of the National Assembly. His mother is a famous actress known as the nation's first love. His older sister, Ki Yoon-bi, is a professional golfer. Today, Seon-yeon attended the Annam Film Festival with his mother. After walking the red carpet, he left his mother behind and left the stage in a hurry. His mother continued to answer interviews with the television station. As the Queen of Cannes, she naturally had many fans. The female protagonist, Oh Mi-ju, is a fan of Seon-yeon's mother. Today, Mi-ju had a date with her best friend, Mei, to watch a movie. But when she saw her idol, she immediately left Mei hanging. All her attention was on her idol. Seon-yeon and his teammates were also gathered nearby. Among them was a friend named Woo-sik, who was very timid. You could tell he was often bullied. At this time, Seon-yeon appeared and offered to take Woo-sik to see a movie. Young Il thought he was pretending to be rich. He also said that the picture Seon-yeon took with his mother was really HF and meant to attract attention. But Seon-yeon clearly didn't know anything about this newly popular term. Then, they went into the cinema to watch a movie together. Mei was also there. She took a picture of the translator's name, Oh Mi-ju, at the end of the movie. It turned out that Mi-ju was the translator for this film. On the stairs of the cinema, Mi-ju felt very proud looking at the picture Mei took of her. Suddenly, the film director, Han Seok-won, who was also Mi-ju's ex-boyfriend, came to talk to her. He directly mocked her, saying that she wasn't professional enough as a translator. Mi-ju, of course, had a sharp tongue and talked back. After Seok-won left, Mei said she had something to do that night and couldn't go with Mi-ju to the movie premiere party. She was very worried that Mi-ju going alone would cause trouble. Sure enough, at the party, Seok-won specifically invited Professor Hwang, their university professor, to the party. After Professor Hwang drank too much, he kept complaining. The former students just listened silently. Mi-ju was bored and muttered that she wanted to go home. Professor Hwang heard this and ordered Mi-ju to pour him a drink. Mi-ju said he couldn't even stand up straight and that they should end it here tonight. Angry, Professor Hwang splashed the wine in her face. He told her to straighten up her attitude. She might have a beautiful face, but it doesn't make up for her attitude. Unexpectedly, Mi-ju directly picked up the water pitcher on the table and poured water on his head to wash away the smell of the alcohol. Then, she demanded that he apologize to her. She accused the professor of insulting her with sexist remarks. Professor Hwang didn't expect her to have such a sharp tongue. Unable to do anything, he yelled madly. He struggled so hard that his wig flew into Mi-ju's hand. Finally, Mi-ju said, "You'll regret your actions today." After leaving the restaurant, Mi-ju accidentally bumped into Seon-yeon. Her gun-shaped lighter attracted his attention. At this time, Seok-won chased after her and grabbed her, wanting her to come back and apologize. Suddenly, Seon-yeon pointed the lighter at Seok-won, hoping he would let go of Mi-ju and then talk. Seon-yeon's inexplicable behavior made both of them think he might be crazy. Just then, fireworks suddenly exploded in the sky. The loud bang scared Seok-won, making him quickly crouch down. Mi-ju used this opportunity to escape, and the gun-shaped lighter was still in Seon-yeon's hand. The next day, because of offending Professor Hwang, Mi-ju was not allowed to be the translator at Seok-won's interview. She had no choice but to bring the cleaned wig and apologize to the professor. She said that the professor didn't understand films like she did. She hoped that he wouldn't let personal grudge cause headaches for the foreign audience. She even directly told him not to be insecure about his baldness. These words poured oil into the fire, making the professor even angrier. At the stadium, athletes were training. Then, in the locker room, young Tulle asked Seon-yeon why he refused the interview. Seon-yeon understood. Although he wasn't the top runner on the track and field team, the reporters were only interested in him because of his family. Woo-sik went to talk to Seon-yeon, revealing the hardship of life as an athlete. To thank Seon-yeon for inviting him to the movies, Woo-sik bought him a can of drink. The next day, Seon-yeon found that Woo-sik was covered in bruises from being beaten. He guessed that he was bullied by Yoo Deok and Gi-beom. But Woo-sik, being timid, said that he had not followed the rules properly, so they did it to him. He told Seon-yeon to pretend that he hadn't seen anything. Feeling helpless and unsure what to say, Seon-yeon could only tell him to get a doctor's diagnosis and take pictures of the bruises in case they needed them. Meanwhile, Miju and Mei went to visit Professor Huang again. They brought ginseng as a gift and successfully entered the professor's house. Unexpectedly, as soon as they entered, Mei and the professor were arguing back and forth, neither of them backing down. Mei even said, "What did I learn from you that I need to respect?" Seeing that the professor was getting angry, Miju quickly put out the fire and humbly apologized. She wanted to get her job back. Coincidentally, Congressman Qi, Xian Guillaume's father, wanted to find a translator for his son. He specifically emphasized that this person must be poor so that he could easily control them. Professor Huang felt that Miju was very qualified, so he pushed this job to her. Miju was very excited because she got to translate for a national athlete. Even though the professor took all her payment, she was willing to do it for free. Miju was playing a game in an internet cafe. She talked to her gaming friend, saying that she had lost her gun. Her friend said that he had a limited edition gun, asking her if she wanted to buy it. Miju immediately agreed. They made plans to meet in Seoul to make the trade. Unexpectedly, the other person was a scammer. He said that he would hand over the goods after getting the money, but after taking the money, he snatched the gun, pushed Miju down, and turned to run away. Miju quickly chased after him. At this time, Dan Ah, the CEO of Dan Agency, was calling Xian Guillaume to make plans to meet. At this moment, Miju ran past Xian Guillaume. The next second, he borrowed something from a passerby, aimed, and threw it at the back of the scammer's head. Miju quickly grabbed the gun and called the police. The people nearby gathered around, all thinking Miju was holding a real gun. They were terrified. The police arrived later and were also startled, demanding she put the gun down. With no other choice, Miju grabbed Xian Guillaume, taking him to the police station with her to give a statement. After leaving the police station, Miju wanted to treat him to dinner as a thank you. Xian Guillaume gave her his number, saying he'd contact her when he was hungry. Then, Miju asked him why he helped her twice. He said he simply liked helping people. There was no reason. That night, Miju received a call from Dan Ah, and they made plans to meet. The next day, while on the way, Miju saw a large billboard advertisement featuring Xian Guillaume, leading her to believe he was a model. After the meeting, Dan Ah didn't hold back, asking if Miju was Professor Huang's runner. Her tone seemed very dissatisfied, which Miju found unpleasant. It seemed like Dan Ah was using her to take out her frustration. Miju told Dan Ah to bring the person she was angry with and talk it out face to face. Dan Ah agreed, but also said she wanted to fire Miju. Miju immediately changed her attitude. Dan Ah found it amusing how her attitude changed so quickly, so she agreed to let her stay. Just then, Xian Guillaume arrived. Seeing him, Miju felt like it was fate, as this was the third time they had met. But Xian Guillaume said it was their fourth encounter. Their first meeting was at a film festival, where he caught Miju expressing her affection for his mother, to the point where she didn't even notice. Her shoelace came untied. Then, Miju solemnly introduced herself as his translator. She extended her hand, hoping he would take care of her in the future. But Xian Guillaume didn't follow convention. He put his hand out to form a gun shape and introduced himself. Miju was afraid that Dan Ah would find out she had gone to the police station with Xian Guillaume. To protect her job, she made her excuses and left in a rush. Dan Ah then took out a newspaper and questioned Xian Guillaume about the dating rumors surrounding him and actress Choi Tae-ri. They had just taken photos for a poster a few days ago, but he had no impression of her. He said he didn't know her, and they just happened to meet that day. After Xian Guillaume left, he ran into Miju again. She told him to quickly return the gun-shaped lighter to her, but he left his things at the athlete village, so he could only return it the next time they met. Then, Miju criticized Xian Guillaume's rumored girlfriend. The woman had come forward to defend herself against the scandal, blaming everything on Xian Guillaume. But Xian Guillaume's reaction was strange. He said he was used to being attacked by others. Therefore, what they said didn't matter. But he felt a new kind of freshness, seeing her stand up for him. The next day, Xian Guillaume texted Miju to arrange a time to meet. Seeing her cheerful and smiling face, he thought she was in love. So he used Seok Won as a negative example to warn her. He also mentioned that Seok Won's film, whose subtitles Miju had translated, won Best Film. Miju was especially excited. This was the first film she had translated that won an award. By chance, she spotted a photo of Xian Guillaume and his mother together. Only then did she realize he was the son of her idol. His sister was a top golfer. We usually remember the name of the person who comes in first, but Seonjeom was the only second-place finisher whose name we remember. Miju couldn't help but be impressed. Even though Miju hustled every day for her livelihood, at least she could live for herself. But Seonjeom's life was full of his family members. His father is a congressman, his mother is an actress, his sister is a golf champion. The only one missing is him. It was raining heavily that night. Woo Sik was bullied by Gyu Deok and Ji Beom. They demanded he hold the wooden stick in his hand. He would be severely punished if he dropped it. While being beaten, Woo Sik accidentally threw the wood at Gyu Deok's face, quickly begging for forgiveness. However, Gyu Deok became even more brutal. Gyu Deok took out his envy and anger towards Seonjeom on Woo Sik. Woo Sik, defying all odds, criticized Gyu Deok, saying that whenever Seonjeom sets a new record, he beats up weak people. He was envious but feared Seonjeom's background. In a fit of anger, Gyu Deok used the wooden stick to beat Woo Sik repeatedly. Seonjeom saw this as he walked by, so he took Woo Sik to the hospital. Woo Sik was seriously injured and had to have surgery on his thigh. Under Seonjeom's continuous questioning, he could no longer maintain his outward composure and burst into tears. He said that he was terrified when he accidentally hit Gyu Deok. Seonjeom said he would beat him up himself. He would stand up for Woo Sik. He then went to find Gyu Deok and punched him. Then he went to find the coach and exposed Gyu Deok's bad behavior. He wanted to use his own punishment to set an example, establishing the principle that if you commit a crime, you will be punished. But the coach didn't do anything about it. It was simply because Gyu Deok and Ji Beom were his people. On the other side, Dana spotted a painting in a cafe. Even though the paint was still wet and stained her sleeve, she paid double the price for it and had it packaged to take away. Later, the art student Lee Young-hwa entered the cafe. He was very happy to know that his work had been recognized. He also bumped into Miju there. After Dana returned to the office, she noticed the wound on Seonjeom's face. He said he fought because he was taking revenge for his junior. Upon hearing this, Dana burst into laughter. She thought revenge only happened in movies. But Seonjeom didn't think it was funny. He said that fighting caused losses, such as contract penalties for advertising. If she needed compensation, just tell him. Dana was very capable in her work. She was ready to turn Seonjeom into a brave hero. This would gain the support of advertisers. But Seonjeom didn't think it was good, saying it was false propaganda. Dana didn't say much, just saying that the photo shoot would go on as planned. After Seonjeom finished his gym workout, he realized he had forgotten his appointment with Miju. He checked his phone and saw a bunch of messages from her. Miju was walking and getting angry. However, she still comforted herself by saying that she was beautiful, kind, and forgiving. Being angry wouldn't solve anything. Then she took out her earphones and listened to music. Suddenly, she saw Seonjeom running towards her from afar. The music in her earphones combined with the scene, creating a dreamlike atmosphere. But for some reason, he ran past her and continued running. Seeing this, she called him and told him her location. Seonjeom nervously said he had mixed up the time of their appointment. Miju was very generous and forgave him. She originally planned to practice the translation with him, but he didn't want to work. So Miju suggested going to see the movie she had translated the subtitles for. Thus, they went to the cinema shortly after they met. Miju said that the dark environment made her feel safe, which was why she liked cinemas. But Seonjeom felt a little scared in such an environment. Miju reassured him warmly, telling him not to worry. After the movie ended, Seonjeom questioned why he didn't see her in the movie. Miju explained to him that she was a translator, only visible at the end of the subtitles. After watching the movie, Seonjeom suggested going for drinks. Miju laughed and asked him if he knew what it was called when you went for drinks after watching a movie. Seonjeom hesitated and said maybe it was called a date. Miju laughed and said it was a movie celebration party. In the bar, Miju told Seonjeom why she became a translator. It was because of a line in a foreign film that brought her comfort. If there weren't subtitles, she wouldn't have understood its meaning. Therefore, she decided to become a translator. The process of translating a movie was very fulfilling. She felt like she had become a millionaire. Seonjeom also talked about his experience in sports. When he ran, he didn't think about what was behind him, but focused on the finish line ahead, because that was the most precious and important thing. And his finish line today had become Miju. Perhaps it had broken his past records. After hearing this, Mi Ju's cheeks turned red, and she felt a flutter in her heart. Seon-jeom, who was drunk, seemed to have shed his shell and was laughing happily. Mi Ju then asked him if he had a place to stay, telling him to go home, or else she was afraid she would do something wrong. Then she stepped forward and closed the gap between them. Their breaths mingled, and Mi Ju gazed at him lovingly. But she ultimately held back. After Mi Ju left, Seon-jeom was in a bad mood and sat by the roadside. Unexpectedly, Mi Ju returned. She felt guilty about leaving him alone. Seon-jeom's mood instantly brightened. He suddenly asked Mi Ju about the movie line she liked. She said it was, "We fall so that we can learn how to stand up on our own." He then took Mi Ju's hand and stood up. On the other side, Choi Tae-ri was being followed and secretly photographed by reporters. At this time, she happened to see Seon-jeom leaning against her car. She assumed he wanted to continue the scandal with her to gain attention. At this moment, Choi Tae-ri's company director rushed out and criticized Seon-jeom for secretly dating their actress. Mi Ju just happened to run over. The director was even angrier, accusing Seon-jeom of being a playboy. Seon-jeom couldn't stand the nagging anymore. To prove his innocence, he pulled Mi Ju close and kissed her. He then declared loudly that she was his girlfriend. He looked cool for a few seconds before passing out in Mi Ju's arms. Meanwhile, Choi Tae-ri patted the hood of the reporter's car, feeling quite satisfied. She said that Mi Ju was an ordinary person, not a public figure. If the reporters didn't want to be sued, they knew what to do. The next morning, Seon-jeom woke up and found himself in an unfamiliar room. Mei and Mi Ju were busy making breakfast. After showering, Seon-jeom put on the men's clothes Mi Ju had given him. The combination of leopard print and leather pants. Although it was very different from his usual style, he was still grateful. At the breakfast table, they calmly chatted about what happened the night before. Because he had impulsively kissed Mi Ju, he obediently admitted his mistake and was willing to accept his punishment. Mi Ju was a little embarrassed, saying it wasn't a kiss, just a touch of lips. She even asked him what kind of lip balm he used, because it was so soft and fragrant. Mei couldn't say anything. Later, they went out together. Mi Ju took advantage of Seon-jeom's absent-mindedness and tricked him into the passenger seat while he wasn't paying attention. She quietly got into the driver's seat and took his beloved car for a test drive. By the time Seon-jeom reacted, it was too late. Seon-jeom originally intended to buy a teddy bear for Woo-sik at the hospital. But Mi Ju used her excellent marksmanship to win him a sea otter. Before leaving, Mi Ju wanted to ask why he kissed her the night before. Seon-jeom innocently explained that he just wanted to break up the dating rumors with Choi Tae-ri. And Mi Ju just happened to be there. This answer was clearly very annoying, making Mi Ju angry and leaving. She said she didn't want to hit him in public. She could only vent her anger on nearby objects. Then Seon-jeom went to the hospital to visit Woo-sik. Outside the ward, he happened to meet Woo-sik's grandmother. She was visiting her injured grandson, but also had to worry about her cleaning job. Life was very difficult for her. The grandmother asked Seon-jeom where Woo-sik's scars came from. No matter how she asked, Woo-sik stayed silent. To avoid making her worry, Seon-jeom didn't mention the reason. He just kept apologizing. The grandmother also thanked Seon-jeom for visiting her grandson. Later, Woo-sik told him that the disciplinary committee would intervene in the assault case. Seon-jeom had a calm expression. No matter what the outcome was, he would happily accept it. Woo-sik couldn't bear to see Seon-jeom punished. Seon-jeom fought because he was standing up for him. Yet Seon-jeom still had the mood to joke. Seon-jeom said he did that because he knew Woo-sik would continue to endure it. Woo-sik would become a national athlete in the future. As for him, he was about to retire. All he had to do was leave the center. He had power and influence at his house, so he didn't have to worry about revenge from others. That's why he dared to stand up. Woo-sik was touched and bowed his head in gratitude. The next day was Seon-jeom's family meeting. But everyone seemed to not care. Yoon-bi looked at the banner of her father's election campaign and sighed, saying that her father always brought the whole family out to show off. Using family affection to win votes was unbearable to her. Seon-jeom said, "This family exists for that purpose." After arriving at the large villa, the family of 4 posed for the cameras with fake smiles. They pretended to be a harmonious and happy family. At the dinner table, the harmony vanished. Congressman Ki reproached Seon-jeom for not being as good as Yoon-bi, always coming in second. He had also caused a commotion in the disciplinary committee by getting into a fight. He became angrier as he spoke. He blamed Seon-jeom for choosing to be a sprinter, a choice without ambition. He would have been better off playing soccer as he had requested. Seon-jeom rejected his father's so-called ambition. He also hoped that his father wouldn't interfere with the disciplinary committee's decision. He was ready to accept his punishment. In his rage, Congressman Ki threw his glass of wine at Seon-jeom, causing a scratch on his face that bled. Seon-jeom left, suppressing his anger. Congressman Ki then turned to blame his wife for not teaching their son properly. Ji-woo mocked him, saying, "If I spent time teaching our children, I wouldn't have been a Cannes queen." Yoon-bai shook her head in frustration at this sight. While working, Mi-ju accidentally cut her hand. When she went out to buy medicine, she ran into Seon-jeom, who was eating a bowl of mixed noodles. Seeing the wound on his face, she kindly helped him apply medicine and asked why he had said he didn't have a home. She had seen his family photo today, taken in front of their house. It even made it to the hot search. Seon-jeom said, "It's only on special days. I don't have a home normally." He then took Mi-ju's hand and applied medicine to her wound. Mi-ju remembered her own situation and felt a little sad. She then said, "If you don't have a home, create a place like it." The next day, the athlete village convened the disciplinary committee. Ju Deok said that because they had broken the rules, Seon-jeom had disciplined them a little, not causing any serious problems. The disciplinary committee members thought the same. This incident was just a fight between athletes. The actions didn't constitute violence. Only Seon-jeom insisted that he deserved to be punished, saying their ruling was unfair. Seon-jeom angrily left and went to find the coach. He asked him if he had submitted the evidence of assault that Woo-sik had given him to the disciplinary committee. But the coach just said, "Those things aren't important. There's no need to submit them." This made Seon-jeom furious. He yelled at the coach. The coach wanted to hit him but was held back by the assistant. So he took his anger out on the assistant, slapping him. After the coach and assistant left, Seon-jeom continued to challenge Ju Deok and Gi-beom, condemning their violence against Woo-sik. But they did not feel remorse and said Seon-jeom was a hypocrite. He was taking advantage of having someone to back him up and doing whatever he wanted. It was raining heavily that night. Mi-ju went to see Congressman Ki. She asked him why he wanted to see her. Congressman Ki smiled and said, "I just wanted to meet my son's work partner." He pretended to be a very caring father. Then he got to the point, saying that Seon-jeom had caused some minor trouble. He hoped that Mi-ju would keep an eye on his son and report everything he did to him. He then gave Congressman Ki said, "I heard you come from a difficult background. Consider this money like your allowance from your parents." Mi-ju immediately responded, "My parents are dead." The congressman laughed and said, "Then consider this money as condolences." Mi-ju's face turned pale, and her hand holding the money trembled slightly. The next day, Mi-ju was getting ready to go to Jeju Island. Seon-jeom and his sister drove to pick her up. During the interview, the foreign journalist kept asking Yoon-bai questions and didn't pay any attention to Seon-jeom. Mi-ju interrupted the reporters and asked them if they were discriminating by only focusing on Yoon-bai. She suggested they should spread out the questions fairly. Yoon-bai smiled and told Seon-jeom, "Treat Mi-ju well. She's looking out for you." In the evening, Mi-ju wanted to return the money to Congressman Ki, so she went to the hotel reception to ask for his room number, lying that she had something to return. Unfortunately, she ran into Yoon-bai. Yoon-bai asked Mi-ju, "Why do you have my father's belongings?" Mi-ju felt a bit embarrassed. Luckily, Yoon-bai didn't continue to ask. Afterward, Mi-ju went for a walk in the hotel garden. Suddenly, she heard hurried footsteps behind her and became very worried. She tried to walk faster, but the person was still chasing her. Mi-ju screamed and cried, covering her head in fear. But it turned out to be Seon-jeom. Then they went to the stadium. After apologizing and calming Mi-ju down, he ran a few more laps. When he stopped, Seon-jeom saw a hallucination in front of him. His parents' competitors suddenly appeared, making him feel tense. So he sat down and talked to Mi-ju. She asked him if he could return her gun-shaped lighter. Seon-jeom apologized, saying he left it in the athlete's village. But he couldn't go back right now because he got into a fight with some gangsters. They walked and talked as they went. Seon-jeom said he wanted to get justice for Woo-sik but failed. Running used to help him forget his troubles, but now it was useless. Mi Ju advised him that if he couldn't overcome the pain, he should allow himself to relax. Don't do things he doesn't want to do. The next day, the athletes arrived at Jeju Island one after another. Woo Sik, who was injured, also came to watch the match. The punishment wasn't satisfactory. The person who attacked him wasn't punished. He could only accept the result and try to forgive him. Seon Jeom comforted Woo Sik, saying he didn't need to forgive him. After all, Woo Sik was the victim. At this time, Dan Ah and others arrived too. Seon Jeom saw his father and Ju Deok's people, laughing and chatting. He went up to his father and asked if he gave them money. Congressman Ki laughed at his son's naivety. He said such an activity was normal. He also told him to not cause trouble, because there were many cameras around. Seon Jeom coldly replied, "If you care so much about your public image, then you shouldn't have let me come here. I gave you a chance." The match was about to begin. The starting whistle blew, and the athletes quickly rushed forward. But Seon Jeom chose not to run. He walked towards the reporters, saying he wouldn't run because he had assaulted his juniors. He was not qualified to participate in the match. Then he looked at Mi Ju, who was standing not far away, and asked her to translate for him. Mi Ju mumbled, "This guy must be crazy." But she still helped him translate. The scene became chaotic for a moment. Later, the reporters found the injured Woo Sik. They thought he was the victim of Seon Jeom's assault. So they surrounded him to interview him. Just when Woo Sik wanted to reveal the truth, the coach led the athletes running to block his words. Ju Deok immediately warned Woo Sik to shut up. The coach told the reporters that Woo Sik was injured during training. He hoped they wouldn't make wild guesses. On the other side, Mi Ju trembled when she realized she had caused a big disaster. But when Congressman Ki came to question her, she said she was just doing her job. Seeing this, Seon Jeom told his father not to involve innocent people. His father immediately scolded him. "Why did you do such a stupid thing? I told you, your stain is my stain. I let you run, even though it was pointless. What are you still dissatisfied with in your life?" Seon Jeom asked back, "You talk as if you control my life." He remembered when he had to have shoulder surgery as a javelin thrower. The first thing his father said was, "Your shoulder is ruined, so you probably won't be able to use it anymore. Your legs are still fine, so you can switch to football." To Seon Jeom, his father only saw him as a tool for his political career. Hearing these accusations, Congressman Ki angrily slapped his son. Seon Jeom left angrily, and Mi Ju followed behind. Dan Ah saw the injury on Seon Jeom's face and told him to go out and relax. But when Seon Jeom pulled Mi Ju to leave together, Dan Ah grabbed Mi Ju's arm. Because Mi Ju was the interpreter that Congressman Ki planted, Dan Ah was always uncomfortable about it. Just then, seeing Congressman Ki in the distance, Dan Ah let go so they could leave. Seon Jeom, being intelligent, guessed that Mi Ju was the one his father planted. So that's why she and Dan Ah weren't comfortable with each other. On the other side, Dan Ah was talking to Congressman Ki. She said she would deal with Seon Jeom's issues. After all, the assault accusations weren't beneficial to her. When Congressman Ki was talking about running for president in the next election, Dan Ah didn't want to listen and left, making him very furious. In the waiting room, young Tuil asked Yoo Deok with suspicion, "Why did Seon Jeom beat them up?" Based on his knowledge of Seon Jeom wouldn't bully his juniors. At this time, Congressman Ki rushed over and kicked the coach's calf. He angrily scolded the coach for disrespecting him and criticized him for not being worthy of being a coach. He also warned that he would keep an eye on the coach, Ju Deok and Gi Beom. The coach was humiliated to the extreme and left in shame. Seeing this, young Ayil couldn't help but say, "These two father and son have completely different personalities. Did he adopt and raise him?" On the other hand, Dan Ah was so tired she was sick. After getting in the fourth drip, she immediately went downstairs to entertain foreign reporters. She wanted to let them write about the incident accurately and transparently. Then, the protagonist, Woo Sik, was brought in. On the other hand, while Dan Ah was away, her half-brother, Tae Woong, ran to the director's office to act like a tyrant. He always wanted to feel a sense of existence in front of Dan Ah, but she always ignored him. At this time, Young Hwa also came to Dan Ah's company. He found her address thanks to the business card she left at the coffee shop. He wanted to know her thoughts about his work. Tae Woong saw a guy walking back and forth downstairs, so he was curious and went down to ask him what he was doing there. They met and immediately started arguing. Then Young Hwa rode away on his bike. accidentally dropping his wallet. Inside the beachside restaurant, Seon Jeom and Mi Ju were eating and chatting. Mi Ju was curious. She wondered what kind of person he would be in a relationship if he could ruin his career for his juniors. Seon Jeom chuckled and said, "It seems you're very curious about me." Mi Ju didn't deny it, but she didn't know why she was curious. At this time, Seon Jeom suddenly said that he always remembered the image of Mi Ju chasing after the scammer. Except when he was competing or training, he wouldn't create emergency situations for himself. Running in that situation could lead to muscle strain. Mi Ju said, "Last time you missed our date, you ran as if you had never run before." Seon Jeom said, "That's because you were waiting for me." Mi Ju blushed and laughed awkwardly. Later, Seon Jeom returned to prepare for the advertising photo shoot. Mi Ju stood outside the door and saw the online criticism of Seon Jeom. People clearly didn't know the truth. They were already attacking him. Mi Ju felt heartbroken for this man, who silently endured all of this. Then she went to see Congressman Key's assistant. He gave her a round-trip ticket. But Mi Ju insisted on staying to work with Seon Jeom. She also returned the money that Congressman Key gave her previously. At this time, Dan Ah came over and talked about how Woo Sik would accept the interview. She was annoyed that bad guys wanted to cover up the truth by saying everything was a misunderstanding. She smiled and reminded Seon Jeom, "You can't let Mi Ju continue to work with you." After all, she learned from Congressman Key that Mi Ju had taken money from him. But Seon Jeom especially trusted Mi Ju. He wanted Mi Ju to remove any parts related to him when translating to help Woo Sik. It was also to avoid his father's revenge against Mi Ju. Hearing this, Mi Ju was furious. First, it was her professional ethics. She didn't want to translate incorrectly. Second, she blamed him for not knowing how to love himself like that. He was always used to letting people put everything on his head. She felt both angry and heartbroken. He seemed to be the kind of person who was used to pain, so he didn't know how to cherish himself. So she would absolutely not agree to his unreasonable request. Finally, with the cooperation of Mi Ju and Woo Sik, the truth about violence in the athletes' village was presented to the reporters. After completing her work, Mi Ju didn't want to say much. She only said, "It's almost time for my flight," and left. The truth was that she had missed her flight a long time ago. Then Seon Jeom called Mi Ju back, suddenly asking a question, "Do you like me?" Mi Ju was completely stunned. Seon Jeom continued, "The things you say to me are like confessions." Mi Ju said, "I like you. This is a real confession. Unless you want every word I say to be a confession." While Seon Jeom was apologizing for his suddenness, Mi Ju added, "It's not that everything I say is a confession, but maybe there's some meaning behind it." Seon Jeom watched Mi Ju walk away, his heart stirred. Mi Ju went home and kept drinking. Both of their moods were very complicated. On the other hand, Yonghua was sitting by the river drawing when Dan Ah's assistant came to find him, taking him to meet her. When Yonghua was circling around the pool, he suddenly saw something that looked like a bracelet at the bottom of the pool. He was looking intently when Dan Ah made a noise behind him, causing him to fall into the pool in fright. After reacting, he reached out and picked up the object at the bottom of the pool. Dan Ah was very surprised to see it was her bracelet. She wanted to reach out to grab it. Unexpectedly, Yonghua grabbed her hand. After learning that Dan Ah was the director, he was incredibly surprised that the director was so young. He thought she would be older. But Dan Ah only cared about the bracelet that he stepped on and ruined. She demanded compensation. But Yonghua said, "I only have this body. But I'm also giving you my heart." Then Dan Ah talked about business with Yonghua and gave him her bathrobe. Yonghua smiled and accepted it. Dan Ah suggested he should change his habits. Otherwise, it would be easy for people to fall for him. On the other side, Congressman Key was informed by his assistant. Seon Jeom could be stripped of his athlete status. He frowned, asking his assistant to arrange a meeting with people who related to this matter. He wanted to turn the stripping of his athlete status into retirement. Immediately, countless flashes pointed at Congressman Key. He bowed deeply to apologize. At this time, Seon Jeom had already packed his things and was about to leave the athletes' village. He remembered why he first started running. It was to escape, to leave everything behind and run far away, to escape the life that his parents had arranged. When he stopped, he could only hear his heart beating like it was going to burst. The loud beating, the feeling of owning his own world. The first run in his life was his own choice. He stood looking at the track that held countless memories. Seonjeom solemnly said goodbye to the athletes' village. Mi-ju was reading the news, but she couldn't find any positive articles about Seonjeom. There was only all kinds of negative news. She wanted to comfort him, but she kept writing and deleting. She still didn't dare to contact him. Then she went to the agreed location to meet Dan-ah. As soon as she sat down, Dan-ah attacked her verbally, saying that she had taken a bribe from Congressman Ki. Mi-ju was speechless. It was true that she was at fault. Dan-ah asked her again, "Why did you still work hard to translate for Seonjeom after taking money from Congressman Ki?" Mi-ju said that she felt sorry for him. At this time, Dan-ah was like discovering a new continent, and asked back, "Seonjeom isn't pitiful." Mi-ju choked. No one feels sorry for him. That's the most pitiful thing about him. Dan-ah accepted the answer, and she reminded Mi-ju not to let Seonjeom know that she took the money. He hated things like that. Dan-ah also said that Seonjeom hadn't liked anyone for a long time, and the last girl he liked was her. Mi-ju was slightly stunned after hearing this. But then she intentionally said she wasn't very interested in Seonjeom's love life. After finishing her coffee in one gulp, Mi-ju went outside to call Seonjeom and asked him to bring the lighter to her. Seonjeom said it would be difficult now. He was afraid he would offend her if he met her now, but Mi-ju insisted on meeting. When she heard him say he was at a hotel, unhealthy thoughts appeared in her mind, but she still pretended to be tough and asked him to send the address. Unexpectedly, as soon as they met, Seonjeom asked directly, "Did my dad give you money?" After a while of dodging, Mi-ju still honestly replied that she had indeed taken the money. If he was disappointed, then he should be. Don't try not to be disappointed. Don't suppress your emotions anymore. Seonjeom remembered what his father's assistant had told him. The assistant had warned him that Mi-ju was pretending to be good to deceive his trust. Congressman Ki had entrusted Mi-ju to monitor him on Jeju Island, and Mi-ju had accepted the money without hesitation. This woman wasn't a good person. But Seonjeom wasn't easily fooled. He wanted to talk to Mi-ju, the person involved. So he questioned her whether she had taken a bribe. Unexpectedly, Mi-ju readily admitted it. However, Seonjeom had long been accustomed to his father spending money everywhere to buy people's trust. After opening up to each other, he forgave Mi-ju. But she felt terrible for deceiving the innocent man in front of her. She took back the lighter and left dejectedly. The next day, Seonjeom pushed a pile of snacks taller than him and went to school to visit his juniors. They had been practicing track and field diligently using the method Seonjeom taught them. The kids didn't believe that Seonjeom would assault people for no reason. They thought of plans for him to start again. Seonjeom drew a line on the ground with his foot. He muttered in confusion, "I don't know if I'm at the starting line or the finish line now." At this time, the school teacher came to talk to him. She said awkwardly that because the parents had heard the rumors about Seonjeom, they didn't want him to continue coaching the track and field team. Seonjeom accepted this calmly, but he hoped to continue sponsoring the kids. On the other hand, Assistant Jong had sent Dan-ah information about the blind dates her father provided. Dan-ah discovered that these people all had flaws. If they weren't divorced twice, they were illegitimate children. She sarcastically said, "Do I need flaws to be on the same level as me?" Then she unexpectedly saw Seonjeom's information. She exclaimed, "Seonjeom's life is ruined, so Congressman Ki is selling him off." Dan-ah knew that blind dates were a tactic. Her father used to force her back to the headquarters. With nowhere to go, she had to compromise. At this time, at the university, Yonghwa was teased by his friend. They drew a cat face on his face, but after he noticed she didn't mind too much, he started mimicking a kitten, acting cute and meowing at his friends. He sadly told Yi-jun that he was enchanted by someone attractive, but he was way out of her league. Yi-jun unconsciously asked, "Is that Rapunzel?" This question suddenly sparked Yonghwa's inspiration. While teaching children to draw, a tall tower imprisoning Rapunzel appeared on his paper. Today, Mi-ju received news that her college friend was getting married. The other party invited everyone to the wedding party at the Seoul Hotel, and Seonjeom happened to live there. She hesitated for a long time, but finally decided to go. On the way, she saw Seonjeom's poster being taken down. She exclaimed, "Those advertisers are so ruthless." After arriving, the bride asked Mi-ju why she wasn't married yet. She also hinted that Mi-ju was a pitiful orphan. Mi-ju responded with a mocking smile and resolutely left the party. She took out her cigarette in frustration, intending to calm down a bit. But she didn't have a lighter. At this time, Seon-jeom came over and took the cigarette from her hand. Mi-ju asked him if he had heard what she and her friends were talking about. But because he was wearing earphones and listening to music, he hadn't heard anything. Then Seon-jeom said that Woo-sik wanted to invite them both for dinner. Actually, Woo-sik only invited him. When Mi-ju heard this, to avoid embarrassment with Seon-jeom, she planned to contact Woo-sik separately. Before she could go far, Seon-jeom quickly stopped her. He frankly said that Woo-sik inviting him for dinner was just an excuse. He was actually afraid she would leave. Mi-ju blushed slightly and thanked Seon-jeom. This made her gloomy mood better. Yonghwa followed Yi-jun to his mother's company and met Dan-ah again, the person he had always remembered. Yi-jun's mother introduced her son and Yonghwa to Dan-ah. When Yonghwa was mesmerized by her, she suddenly came closer and smelled the oil paint on him. Being so close to the goddess, Yonghwa felt incredibly nervous. But he still remembered the purpose of his trip. Then he took out 500,000 won and gave it to her to compensate for the bracelet he ruined. Dan-ah asked him why he didn't leave the money at the reception desk. Yonghwa said, "How can you leave such a large amount of money there?" Unexpectedly, Dan-ah found this very funny. To her, 500,000 won was just a small amount. Then Dan-ah and her assistant went to the headquarters and happened to meet her half-brother, Myung-min. She didn't even bother to greet him, directly passing him by. Myung-min was in a bad mood and began to sneer at Dan-ah's existence. He mocked her, saying she was just a woman and couldn't become the company's person in charge. Angered, Dan-ah approached him and delivered a killer blow. She knew he was born from her father's affair. "You're an illegitimate child, but you think you're the legitimate one. You dare talk back to me." She told him to lower his tail and be a man, otherwise, she would reveal this secret. Myung-min was speechless, unable to say a word. Then Dan-ah went to the coffee shop to enjoy Yonghwa's new works. Her thoughtful and charming figure fell into the eyes of Yonghwa, who was secretly watching her through the window. He started taking out his pen and sketching her. He captured this beautiful scene with each stroke of his pen. This behavior of his almost got caught by Yi-jun. He nervously pedaled away on his bike. Then he brought the broken bracelet to a gold shop. The owner told him to go to a luxury brand store to have it fixed. After all, it was an expensive bracelet. It cost about 10 million won. Yonghwa's eyes widened in astonishment. He mumbled, "That's 500 orders of fried chicken gone." On the other side, Mi-ju and Seon-jeom happened to meet at a restaurant. They were both very surprised. It turned out that Woo-sik had reserved a table beforehand and invited both of them at the same time. But he didn't come himself. He wanted to give them a chance to make up. Seon-jeom, to avoid suspicion, politely sat a bit further away. When the owner saw this, she said that there wasn't enough seating, and told Seon-jeom to sit at the same table with Mi-ju. Then Seon-jeom talked about his recent situation. He said he was kicked out of the coaching position for the children's track and field team. It was because of the reputation of the violent athlete. Mi-ju comforted him. Failure is also a process to reach success. There are many famous people who were at the bottom of society before they rose to the top. She also said, "If you feel bored, you can come to me." Seon-jeom laughed happily after hearing that. After the meal, they saw a sign at the door of the store, "Congratulations to Kim Woo-sik on joining the national team." Mi-ju laughed and said, "When I met May at the age of 20, my life also became brighter." And to Woo-sik, Seon-jeom is a person like that. Then Mi-ju saw Woo-sik's English interview on the web. She hurried home and translated it into Korean. She stayed up all night to send the manuscript to major media websites. Heaven rewarded those who worked hard. More and more people saw the truth about the violence. Mi-ju also used her connections to push the news to more platforms. Media outlets were also paying increasing attention to the incident, participating in reporting one after another. Finally, Seon-jeom saw this news and received the news that Woo-sik was going to leave the track and field team. He rushed to the rehabilitation center and the restaurant to find Woo-sik, but couldn't find him. In the previous interview, Woo-sik was doubtful about his strength after recovering. After careful consideration, he told the reporters that he had decided to quit track and field. Mi-ju had not informed Seon-jeom about Woo-sik's plan. In the heavy rain, Seon-jeom, completely soaked, went to find Mi-ju. He asked her in confusion, "Why didn't you tell me that Woo-sik wanted to leave the team?" Mi-ju reluctantly said, I was afraid you would be like this. The person who always hoped his juniors could compete. How sad he would be if he knew his juniors were going to quit. Mi Ju couldn't bear to see Seon-jeom so dejected. She pulled him closer and hugged him. She gently patted his back to soothe his mood. The next morning, Seon-jeom got up early as usual, put on his sportswear, and went for a run. But after thinking for a while, he turned around and went back to bed. Inside the hair salon, Mrs. Ji-woo overheard others praising her son for having a strong sense of justice. Meanwhile, at the party, Congressman Ki's colleagues were showering him with praise. They said he apologized to the citizens, even though he knew the truth. Congressman Ki humbly expressed, "I have learned a lot from my son." In the hospital, Dan-ah was informed by the doctor that she had arrhythmia. At this time, she also paid attention to Seon-jeom's news. In the athletes' village, the coach saw his name mentioned in the article and kept sighing. Meanwhile, Ju Deok and Ji Byum received bad looks from everyone. Everyone was afraid to stay away from them. On the other hand, Seon-jeom received a message from Woo Sik. He said he didn't dare to contact him because he left the team on his own. Mi Ju also sent a message, saying that if he couldn't sleep, she would recommend some movies for him to help him sleep. Seon-jeom recalled the warm hug last night, and his heart felt very peaceful. The disciplinary committee would make a new ruling about the violence in the athletes' village. They decided to send Ju Deok and Ji Byum to the military. But no one asked about Woo Sik, the victim. Seon-jeom was suspended as an athlete for 6 months. After 6 months, he could return as before. At this time, he questioned the fairness of the punishment again. He was angry that Woo Sik was called a whistleblower. The disciplinary committee warned him that if he persisted again, he would lose his athlete status. Unexpectedly, Seon-jeom stood up directly and declared his retirement. At this time, reporters surrounded the hotel reception to interview Seon-jeom. Seon-jeom also had no intention of continuing to live there. When everything calmed down, Woo Sik finally picked up Seon-jeom's phone. He kept apologizing, saying that he lacked the courage to face Seon-jeom, afraid of making him angry. Seon-jeom reluctantly said, "What can you do now? Of course, I respect Woo Sik's choice." Inside the coffee shop, Mi Ju thought about how Seon-jeom left without saying goodbye that night. When she was struggling with whether to contact him or not, Dan-ah happened to appear. It could be said that they were fated to meet. Mi Ju immediately asked Dan-ah, "Why did you say that Seon-jeom used to like you that day?" Dan-ah laughed and said, "I didn't expect you to remember so clearly." She teased, "Should we try a three-way relationship?" As soon as Mi Ju was about to burst with anger, Dan-ah said, "I just wanted to be friends with you." Hearing this, Mi Ju felt goosebumps. At this time, Seon-jeom also went to this coffee shop. He had a date with Dan-ah. As soon as he entered, he went straight to her, without seeing Mi Ju also there. Dan-ah had successfully signed a contract with Yoon Bai, and announced that she was canceling her contract with him. Both sides were happy. Then Seon-jeom said that he had retired, which surprised Dan-ah and Mi Ju very much. Dan-ah asked him where he would go after that. Then she deliberately tossed her hair seductively, and intimately grabbed Seon-jeom's hand. Then she stroked his cheeks and said, "You can stay at my place." Sure enough, under Dan-ah's provocation, Mi Ju couldn't sit still. She continuously lowered Dan-ah's apartment, and deliberately introduced her own home, saying it had 3 rooms. Seon-jeom sat beside her, dazed, not understanding why they were arguing suddenly. When leaving, Mi Ju suddenly met May's assistant. Because she was carrying heavy things, Seon-jeom helped her. So, Mi Ju took this opportunity to plead with May to let him live in their house. Unable to stand Mi Ju's nagging, May reluctantly invited Seon-jeom to his house. But Seon-jeom quickly refused. When he returned, Seon-jeom remembered when he was sick before. There were all kinds of flower arrangements around, but no one was by his side. It was similar to now. He wondered why, among the things he loved, he didn't have himself. Soon after, the track and field teacher came to find Seon-jeom and invited him to continue coaching. But Seon-jeom refused, saying he wasn't qualified. He also agreed to help the teacher find a good coach. After driving out of school, he wanted to return to a warm home. Seon-jeom's mood was very low, so he followed his heart and drove near Mi Ju's house. He was rewarded for his efforts, and indeed met Mi Ju. Mi Ju asked him why he was in this area. At this time, Seon-jeom sincerely asked, "Can I live in your house?" Mi Ju was surprised, and then warmly invited him home. Originally thinking he would have a separate bedroom, he was unexpectedly informed that the living room was his room. Mi-ju jokingly said, "Our house has 3 rooms. The third room is the living room." In the evening, Seon-jeom peacefully lay on the sofa. A loud typing sound came from Mi-ju's room. At this time, she wasn't in the mood to work. The only thing she typed was that Seon-jeom was sleeping behind that door. In the black and white movie she imagined, she was drinking wine with Seon-jeom, commemorating this special day. Suddenly, May's phone woke her up from her dream. She told May that Seon-jeom would definitely move in. May then told her to be sober and not have bad intentions towards him. Living together wasn't as beautiful as she imagined. Mi-ju worked day and night. She hardly ever saw Seon-jeom. Seon-jeom cooked rice, but it went cold, and he still didn't see Mi-ju appear. When Mi-ju woke up, she only ate light meals like oatmeal and milk. She also drank a lot of health supplements and told him, "I'm just eating to survive." Seon-jeom was very worried about her health. The next day, Seon-jeom went to the supermarket to buy groceries and happened to meet Young-hwa there. Young-hwa immediately recognized him. They were both amazed by the miracle of fate. To thank Young-hwa for lending him the paintbrush, Seon-jeom told him to let him pay for everything. Seeing this, Young-hwa happily called Seon-jeom brother. After returning home, he saw that Mi-ju had left her phone outside, so he brought it into her room for her. Mi-ju introduced her work to him. Dissatisfied with her packed schedule, Seon-jeom added her mealtime to the schedule. He asked a little resentful, "Didn't you say you would play with me?" Out of the blue, this wish came true the next day. Mi-ju got up early and said she wanted to go for a run with him. But after running for a while, Mi-ju was too tired to breathe and could only ask Seon-jeom to stop. She asked him to teach her the correct running posture. To address her shoulder strength issues, he put his hand on her shoulder. The attraction was undeniable. Seon-jeom said he was happy to run with her. They ran happily in the park. They chased each other intimately. On the other hand, the coach Seon-jeom wanted to invite to coach the children's track and field team was his first coach. It was thanks to her that he became a national athlete. He wasn't sure if he could invite her. Seon-jeom lacked confidence, so he invited Mi-ju to visit Coach Bang with him. Mi-ju sweetly smiled and immediately agreed. The next day, the sun was shining and the sports car drove along the country road. After they arrived at Coach Bang's house, she warmly entertained Mi-ju with delicious food. Mi-ju also proactively asked to be her drinking buddy. Unexpectedly, after drinking for a while, she became drunk and dazed. Coach Bang and Seon-jeom began reminiscing about the past. It was clear that she had a deep connection with Seon-jeom's family. At this time, Seon-jeom proposed that he wanted her to be the track and field coach for the children at the school. Unexpectedly, she got angry and chased them out. Her loud scolding woke Mi-ju up, but she didn't forget the purpose of this trip and asked why Coach Bang didn't want to return to track and field. She mumbled, "Did someone tire you out? If I knew who it was, I wouldn't let them get away with it." Then she started throwing food around. Seon-jeom had to carry the drunk Mi-ju into the car and look for a homestay. Suddenly, Mi-ju grabbed his hand and mumbled, "Don't go." She said that she actually wanted to help him was just an excuse. She just wanted to spend more time with him. She got drunk just to go to bed early. If she changed her schedule like that, she would see him more. Seon-jeom asked with concern, "Are you okay? Do you need anything?" Mi-ju replied, "Then you should like me." Seon-jeom looked intently at Mi-ju and whispered, "I already do." The next morning, Mi-ju woke up in the car, and Seon-jeom was beside her, leaning against the door and sleeping soundly. He slept like a child. Under Coach Bang's hospitality, they enjoyed a delicious breakfast. Seon-jeom remembered the first time he met her. Her warm hand stroked his head as she chatted with him intimately. After growing up, he became an athlete under Coach Bang. Once, Seon-jeom witnessed her angrily beating another coach. Now, he wanted to know why she fought. Because after that incident, Coach Bang disappeared. This unresolved case had always worried him. But she only vaguely said, "I was chased away from the place I trusted." Mi-ju took the opportunity to interject, "You can go to the school and teach the kids." She said she needed to consider if Seon-jeom was worthy of being a coach. Seon-jeom also added that his teaching ability was very poor and that he needed her to guide him. Unexpectedly, Coach Bang told them to go home early. After returning, Seon-jeom prepared to go to Dana's company. At this time, Young-hwa rode his bike past and knew about it. He immediately clung to him and asked to go with him. Unexpectedly, at the company gate, Seon-jeom's fingerprint access was deleted. Moreover, it was the weekend. Dan-ah wouldn't be at the company. Yonghwa immediately showed his disappointment. He originally intended to use Seon-jeom as an excuse to find Dan-ah and get back the 500,001 he left in the gift bag for her the other day. It wasn't a small amount of money to him. On the other side, Mi-ju, at the producer's request, agreed to go to the film set with Mei to help. The other party also gave Mi-ju 2 movie tickets for her to go watch with her friend. Then Mi-ju relayed the producer's work invitation to Mei. Mei agreed and asked Mi-ju to invite Seon-jeom to watch a movie together. But Mi-ju knew he didn't like watching movies, so this proposal could only be rejected. Congressman Ki looked at the photos of his family. He saw that both his wife and daughter could proudly show off to others. Only his son, Seon-jeom, was the exception. So, he had to quickly promote his son and Dan-ah's marriage. Knowing that his wife would attend a movie premiere, Congressman Ki immediately came up with a plan. He wanted to create an image of a loving couple, dating for Seon-jeom and Dan-ah. Soon after, Dan-ah was informed by her secretary that Congressman Ki had invited her to the movie premiere. In a flash, she realized that he wanted them to have a natural encounter, creating opportunities for her to date Seon-jeom. On the other side, Congressman Ki told Seon-jeom, "If you don't want to be an athlete anymore, then marry Dan-ah. After marriage, you maintain it for 2 years, then it'll be fine." Seon-jeom decided to refuse. He didn't want his father to control his life again. At this time, the assistant came over and handed him a ticket for the movie premiere. Looking at his rebellious son, Congressman Ki couldn't understand why his son had changed so much. On the way back, Seon-jeom happened to meet Mi-ju. They went home together. Mi-ju encouraged him, "You're sure to successfully transition to a new career. The memory of your past glory will definitely be a motivation for you to enter a new world." In the evening, Seon-jeom told Mi-ju, "Coach Bang will come to the children's track and field team practice. I want to invite you to go with me." Then, Mi-ju said, "I'm going on a business trip to another province with Mei for a few days next week." Seeing his pitiful appearance, she suddenly felt heartbroken. Seon-jeom said dejectedly, "I want to go out for some fresh air." Then he unexpectedly met Yonghwa. They both had their own worries, so they decided to drown their sorrows together. Yonghwa added honey to the beer and drank with Seon-jeom. Seon-jeom said with a faint sadness, "I'm going to move out next week. I don't want to be home alone." Soon after, Seon-jeom fell asleep drunk at Yonghwa's house. At this time, Mi-ju was searching for Seon-jeom everywhere in the house. After searching without any results, she even thought about calling the police. Mei couldn't help but tease her. Mi-ju imagined Seon-jeom possibly spending the night with someone else, and she was so angry. Her teeth were grinding. The next day, Seon-jeom woke up with a large jar of honey in his hand. He remembered that after Yonghwa gave him the honey last night. He then took out the movie premiere ticket, with a seat next to Dan-ah, and gave it to Yonghwa as a thank you gift. After that, he returned to Mi-ju's house. At this time, Mi-ju was sitting on the sofa, furious. Apparently his hand wasn't broken, and he didn't even reply to her message. After finding out that he had drunk with someone else last night, she immediately asked him who he had slept with. But Seon-jeom calmly replied, "Even if I told you, you wouldn't know." Mi-ju angrily went straight into her room. Then, regardless of what Seon-jeom said, Mi-ju ignored him. He had to knock on her door and try to talk to her. After Mei came, Mi-ju opened the door with a blank expression. She said, "I won't break my word. I'll go to see Coach Bang with you." Then she closed the door again. The next day, Mi-ju and Seon-jeom went to school together to see Coach Bang. She noticed that they were having a conflict. Mi-ju said, "I don't know if we're fighting or not. It's just me who's upset." Seon-jeom didn't even know what she was upset about. Coach Bang said, "I bet he made you upset again with his innocent face, huh?" Then the two of them sat together and scolded Seon-jeom. Coach Bang felt that she and Mi-ju were meant to be friends. She wanted to be good friends with her. Then, taking advantage of the fact that they were alone, Seon-jeom asked Mi-ju to give him a chance to explain. But when Mi-ju asked him why he didn't reply to her message, he frankly said, "Even if I replied, I already spent the night somewhere else. Would it have made any difference?" Mi-ju became even angrier after hearing this. Seon-jeom looked innocent and said, "If you didn't get a response, you could have called me." But in Mi Ju's eyes, she didn't have the right to ask about his private life. Even when she asked him who he drank with, she didn't get an answer. Seon-jeom apologized for not notifying Mi Ju beforehand. This was the first time he lived with someone else, so he didn't have much experience. Mi Ju understood, because he only saw her house as a temporary place to stay, so he did whatever he wanted. He immediately set boundaries with her, without any courtesy. Mi Ju became angrier as she spoke and turned to leave. On the other side, Dan Ah went to see Younghwa about his work manuscript. When they both went to the school playground to chat, a ball rolled towards them. Dan Ah excitedly picked up the ball and kicked it back. She told him, "My original dream was to be a soccer player. But after my brother told my dad, my dream was immediately over. I can only wear sneakers every day, not missing any chance to be near soccer." Younghwa said, "I have had a dream lately. It's to talk to Dan Ah directly." The next day, Mi Ju had planned to watch a movie with Mei. Unexpectedly, the person who came for the date was Seon-jeom. Mi Ju was still angry. She said, "It's not too late to find the knot between us and reconcile." Seon-jeom wouldn't dare to say no. He immediately agreed. At the movie premiere, Mrs. Ji-woo was chatting with others. Congressman Ki suddenly gave her flowers. He pretended to say that he liked to surprise his wife. Everyone admired them for being a model couple. Mrs. Ji-woo put on a fake smile, and then handed the flowers to her assistant, asking her to throw them away. Congressman Ki also asked his wife to help find Dan Ah. He wanted Dan Ah to marry Seon-jeom. Mrs. Ji-woo was very annoyed after hearing this. Soon after, Congressman Ki, his wife, Mi Ju, and Seon-jeom, a pair of enemies who met by fate, came face to face. Congressman Ki thought that Mi Ju was still clinging to his son and started to humiliate her. He told her to leave if she knew what was good for her. Mi Ju immediately left, but didn't forget to ask Seon-jeom, "Aren't you coming with me? You're coming to watch the movie with me." After saying that, she pulled him away right in front of his parents. Seon-jeom followed behind her with a sweet smile. Congressman Ki was very surprised. Mrs. Ji-woo smiled and stopped her husband. "Let it go. We came here to watch the movie with me today." Mi Ju took Seon-jeom to a corner and said, "It's your family matter, so I don't want to get involved. But you are too pitiful. Please save yourself before saving others." Then she questioned him about the encounter with Dan Ah his father had mentioned. Seon-jeom immediately said, "If I was here to meet Dan Ah, then I wouldn't have been following you." Seeing that he was hiding something from her, Mi Ju seemed even angrier. In the cinema, Younghwa was eagerly waiting for Dan Ah to come. Unexpectedly, Assistant Jong came to sit beside him instead. This made him very disappointed. After the movie ended, Younghwa's eyes were red. He excitedly found Seon-jeom and asked why Dan Ah didn't come. He also explained that he cried because the movie was too touching. At this time, Mi Ju learned through the conversation between the two that Seon-jeom had stayed at Younghwa's house the night before. So, the post-movie party, which was supposed to be for 2 people, turned into 3. Seon-jeom really wanted to send Younghwa back home, but he couldn't. Then, Mi Ju and Younghwa happily discussed the movie. Seon-jeom was so pitiful that he couldn't get a word in. Suddenly, Younghwa thought about how Seon-jeom and Dan Ah knew each other, so he wanted to get Dan Ah's phone number. But Mi Ju thought that he couldn't do that without her permission. So Younghwa took out his recording of Dan Ah as evidence. He guaranteed that his actions were approved by her. Previously, when he had tried to get Dan Ah's phone number, she told him that if he had the guts, he could figure it out himself. So, he made a recording as evidence. Unexpectedly, it came in handy today. Soon, Dan Ah received a message from Younghwa. The bartender on the side saw that Dan Ah was very interested in this person. Dan Ah casually changed the subject. Then she left the book in her hand at the bar. After returning home, she saw that her father was showing more favoritism towards Myung-min. She didn't bother to say anything. Myung-min was born 10 months after her, and because her father favored sons over daughters, he forged their birth certificates. He also forced her to call him brother. What made her even more disgusted was that Myung-min's mother was a maid for her mother. At this time, her father urged her to get married quickly. He said he would help her find a suitable partner. He also said, "Luckily I have a daughter. It's important for a father to walk his daughter down the aisle." Dan Ah understood. He was using sentimentality to try to make her obediently get married. So, she pulled her hand away and left. Then she saw Tae-wung standing on the side. Tae-wung chased after Dan. They talked in the parking garage. Taewon knew that today was Dan-ah's mother's anniversary, so he took out a rice cake and gave it to her. Unexpectedly, he was mocked by Dan-ah. Dan-ah looked confused. She had clearly said she didn't like Taewon. Why was he always bothering her? He replied, "At least you hate me. It's better than seeing me as heir." Hatred is also a kind of concern. But Dan-ah still coldly left, leaving Taewon alone. Then Dan-ah went to the coffee shop and quietly looked at Yonghwa's painting, still shining in the darkness. The next day, Mi-ju and Mei went on a business trip. Mi-ju was busy on the film set, and Seon-jeom did housework. Time passed quietly. In the evening, Mi-ju and Mei returned to the hotel. They discovered that the environment here was really bad. There wasn't even a blanket on the bed. After cleaning up, Mi-ju tried to suppress her interest in Seon-jeom. She put down her phone and went to sleep. And at home, Seon-jeom was also hesitant about whether to contact her or not. The next morning, Mi-ju jumped up in shock and shouted because Mei was sleeping with his eyes open. And Seon-jeom drove to his mother's film set. He saw his mother covered in blood. After asking, he learned that the character she was playing was a murderer. Seon-jeom had become unemployed, and his mother had never blamed him. It was because she remembered his tolerance for this family. When his mother was busy working, he obediently listened to her. When his sister was busy competing, he didn't bother her. To get his father elected, he tried his best to win medals. For his family, Seon-jeom always silently followed everything, and never complained. She felt very guilty for becoming an inadequate parent. Mrs. Ji-woo hoped that next time, her son could bring Mi-ju with him to visit her. Then, Seon-jeom asked why his mother married his father. She replied, "It was because of love." Then, Mi-ju received a message from Seon-jeom. The content of the message was, "My mother said to be nice to her fans." Mi-ju sweetly smiled and said, "You're so cute." The next day, Mi-ju stood behind the cinematographer and the foreign director, busy recording their words. She translated them into Korean to convey to the staff, but she carelessly missed a detail. She bowed her head and apologized to the two of them. And she told the cinematographer, "I hope you can pause for a moment when you speak, so I can relay it better." In the evening after work, Mi-ju didn't feel well. Then, the film set staff came to the translator's room. They asked them to find a qualified driver. Mi-ju and Mei both thought of Seon-jeom. He could be the driver. Mi-ju quickly contacted him and asked him to come to her. At night while sleeping, Mei rolled up Mi-ju's blanket. Mi-ju wasn't feeling well. Now she was even worse. The next day she planned to take a taxi to the hospital, but the film set location was remote, and there weren't any taxis around. She had no choice but to drag her sick body to the hospital. The doctor said she had a fever due to overwork. While Mi-ju was lying on the bed getting in the fourth drip, a couple of older women pulled the curtains aside and enthusiastically invited her to eat oranges. Because of her dizziness, Mi-ju politely declined. Illness made her vulnerable. So after Seon-jeom rushed over, he saw that her eyes were red. He worriedly asked if there was anything he could do for her. Mi-ju resentfully complained about the noise of the two older women next to her. So Seon-jeom ate tangerines and asked them to keep their voices down and not bother Mi-ju. After she was discharged from the hospital, Seon-jeom said that while she was sleeping, she called out for her mother. She chuckled and replied, "I was just imitating the little kids in the ward when I was younger. I'm an orphan. I don't have a mother." But she wanted to look like a child in a normal family. She was afraid of people's strange looks. Next, she asked Seon-jeom if he had any fears. He replied that he hadn't before, but now he did. They returned to the hotel. Seon-jeom looked at the damp room and was astonished. Then, Mi-ju started working again. She led Seon-jeom to greet the other staff members. Seeing that the living conditions here were not good, Seon-jeom went to find Mei and PD Hui-jin to suggest changing their accommodation. However, Hui-jin said they didn't have enough funding. Unexpectedly, Seon-jeom took the initiative to offer to sponsor them. This made the two of them widen their eyes in astonishment. Soon, their accommodation was improved. Seon-jeom helped Mi-ju organize her clothes. He discovered that she liked leopard print. Then he helped Mi-ju wipe her arm and heard her whispering, "Mom." Seon-jeom looked at her with affection and said, "In the future, if you are sick or tired, just call my name." Mi-ju reached out her hand, and their hands clasped together. Their hearts slowly drew closer. The next day, Mi-ju woke up and was startled by her terrible appearance. She quickly put on makeup, wanting to salvage her image in Seon-jeom's mind. Unexpectedly, after meeting him, he said, "You were beautiful yesterday too." Then, Mi-ju asked him why he agreed to come here. He said with affection, "Because you're here." After the meal, they met the lead actor James. Strangely, James said that Mi-ju was playing a very dangerous game because he thought she was cute and Seon-jeom was attractive. Seeing his girlfriend complimenting another man, James's boyfriend quickly pulled him away. And Seon-jeom, not understanding English, had an innocent expression. Then, Seon-jeom drove James and his boyfriend to the film set. James praised his driving skills. While waiting for James to film, Mi-ju took the opportunity to visit Seon-jeom. Afraid he would be bored, she lent him her movie account and told him to watch movies to pass the time. But Seon-jeom wanted to write a diary, recording the incident of Mi-ju getting sick yesterday. A while later, he complained to Mi-ju that the diary was very difficult to write. Mi-ju laughed and cried, saying the diary was for him. He didn't need fancy language. Seon-jeom learned how to write a diary and was very happy. The next day, Young-il called Seon-jeom. Knowing that he was near the athlete's village, Young-il rode his motorcycle to the film set. After talking for a while, Seon-jeom got busy with work. He left Mi-ju and Young-won-3. Young-tul realized that the relationship between Mi-ju and Seon-jeom wasn't simple. Because Seon-jeom was so boring, most of the girls who had a crush on him couldn't stand it for a month. And she had exceeded that time. Then Seon-jeom quickly returned. He chatted with Young-tul by the beach. Young-tul felt sad. After Seon-jeom and Woo-sik left, he had no rivals anymore. On lonely days, he remembered when he had a conflict with Seon-jeom. It was always Woo-sik who cheerfully stepped in to reconcile them. It was hard to imagine that Woo-sik had been bullied. They both hoped that Woo-sik would return to the track again. As dusk fell, James had a schedule issue and had a heated argument with the cinematographer. When Mi-ju was talking to James, a female PD who didn't know English thought James was dissatisfied with his salary and directly intervened, rejecting his request. At this time, Mi-ju exploded with anger at her. Then Mi-ju went to the side of the car and tried to talk to James, but he ignored her. Seon-jeom warmly comforted her, telling her not to worry. Unexpectedly, the next day, Hui-jin discovered that James had checked out. So they were immediately scolded by the female PD. The cinematographer also blamed them. Just then, Seon-jeom drove James and his boyfriend to the film set. It turned out that James asked him to take them to the station, but he didn't understand English. So he brought them here. This misunderstanding saved the film set from losses. However, the cinematographer still didn't want to let the translators off the hook. He was very serious about this film and thought the translators had intentionally translated carelessly, which led to this situation. His tone was very harsh. He even said, "Is Korea so small that your minds are also narrow?" Hearing that, Mi-ju's hot temper flared up. She directly cursed at the director. When James saw this, he was very pleased with Mi-ju. She had helped him get revenge for what happened last night. At this time, the mayor and Congressman Ki came to visit. Congressman Ki maintained a kind exterior, smiled insincerely, and told Mi-ju, "You have a fleeting relationship with my son. I will help sponsor the production costs." But when he learned that Seon-jeom was driving to the film set, he was very unhappy. After Congressman Ki left the film set, the female PD proudly told Mi-ju, "The director asked you to pack up your things and leave tomorrow." Mi-ju felt very bad. In the evening, Seon-jeom brought wine and food to drink with Mi-ju. Mi-ju told him, "Your name will also be in the credits for this film." Seon-jeom was very happy after hearing that. At this time, he frankly admitted that he could speak English. Mi-ju was stunned. James had been able to come to the film set because Seon-jeom deliberately brought him there. Then he told Mi-ju, "Don't blame yourself for other people's mistakes." The next day, Mi-ju took the initiative to find the cinematographer and was determined to do a good job on her last day. After she finished, she went to find Seon-jeom. He asked her how she knew he was here. She teased him, saying, "All the female staff members are gossiping about how you're running errands here." They chatted while looking out at the sea. Returning to the hotel, Seon-jeom gave Mi-ju a pair of sneakers. He thanked her for taking care of him during this time. Then he said, "I've moved out of your house." Mi-ju was very surprised. These past few days, living together, she felt the distance between them had been closing. Now, it felt like something was separating them again. She angrily turned around and entered her room. After thinking for a moment, she returned to Seon Gyom. She didn't want their relationship to become stiff again. Unexpectedly, he said, "I'm still doing that. You said it when you were drunk last time. You should like me." Hearing this, Miju felt extremely embarrassed and refused to go on a trip with him. Then she took the bus back home by herself. On the other side, Dan-ah had once said that Yonghwa's paintings were too dark. This comment affected him. Today, Yonghwa went to buy coffee and met Dan-ah there. He mumbled, "I know why I feel uncomfortable. It's because I miss her." Dan-ah came over and asked about the painting. She asked him how far he had gotten, but Yonghwa didn't answer. He praised her for being cute and left, leaving Dan-ah speechless. When she returned home, she suddenly discovered that she couldn't sleep. Moreover, when she thought about Yonghwa, she couldn't understand why she was smiling. So, she asked Assistant Jong to take her to a bar to drink. Woo-sik was cleaning the building, and Seon Gyom helped him on the side. While taking a break, Woo-sik pretended to be cheerful and said, "I'm determined to become a civil servant. Because after this, no matter what sport I participate in, everyone will see me as a whistleblower. So it's better to switch to a place where I won't be ostracized. I'll start over." Seon Gyom seriously said that Woo-sik shouldn't be influenced by others and should put himself first. Just be an athlete like you want to be. Previously, Dan-ah had seen Yonghwa's paintings in the coffee shop and invited him to paint for the company. But he hadn't delivered any work yet. So, Myung-min mocked her. So, Dan-ah went to find Yonghwa, full of anger. She said, "Because you didn't paint properly, I lost face in front of that scumbag brother of mine." These words made Yonghwa misunderstand. He thought that his work was just for Dan-ah to save her image. In a flash, he felt his dignity was offended. He immediately took his palette and smeared paint all over the painting. He destroyed the work he was supposed to deliver to her. At this time, Dan-ah realized that it was her painting. She asked, "What are you doing to my painting?" Yonghwa seriously said, "As long as it's not given to you, it's still mine." So, they argued fiercely, neither one willing to give in. Yonghwa angrily criticized Dan-ah for using people like machines. As soon as she couldn't control them, she was ready to abandon them. Dan-ah laughed loudly and said, "Seeing you so poor is actually very interesting. If it wasn't for me sponsoring you, you wouldn't even have the chance to paint." Yonghwa felt hurt and painfully said, "You're not what I expected. I just want to meet you and occasionally discuss painting. I didn't expect you to just want to use me to win against others." Hearing that, Dan-ah told him to wake up. "That's what happens when you expect more from a business deal, little student." After leaving the building, Dan-ah angrily shouted. She called and asked Assistant Jong to gather the files of new artists who hadn't signed with any galleries or exhibitions. Yonghwa, who had argued with Dan-ah for his self-esteem just moments before, was urged by his landlord to pay the rent. He was in a dilemma, wondering whether to ask Dan-ah for the 500,000 won back. In the evening, Seon Gyom took Woo-sik back home. After hearing Woo-sik say he was going to see the coach, he couldn't rest easy. So he called Assistant Jong to ask when Dan-ah was free. As he hung up, he received a call from Yonghwa. They met on the rooftop of Yonghwa's house. Yonghwa looked depressed and said he didn't have the money to pay the rent. Then he turned to Seon Gyom and said, "If you just come to live with me and help me pay the rent this month, I'll serve you like a king." Unexpectedly, Seon Gyom didn't hesitate. He asked him to give him his bank account number, but refused to live together. At the same time, Miju was complaining to Mei about her uselessness. She didn't dare to proactively express her love for Seon Gyom. Mei said, "Seon Gyom left Honey behind. Use that as an excuse to go meet him." Following Mei's advice, Miju called Seon Gyom and said in one breath that she wanted to meet him, and then hung up immediately. But she didn't say when to meet. So Seon Gyom called back. Miju held the phone like a hot potato, pacing back and forth, not daring to answer. Seeing her not answering, he sent a message. The next day, Seon Gyom went to the company to find Dan-ah and asked her about Woo-sik's progress. Dan-ah said directly that Woo-sik had offended the coach, and even if he switched to another team, he wouldn't attract attention. But he didn't want Woo-sik to waste his talent, and asked Dan-ah to think of a solution. Before leaving, he saw his photo next to the trash can. His emotions were mixed. Maybe that's what Yonghwa had said. When she couldn't control something, Dan-ah would choose to abandon it. The next day was the day Seon Gyom was supposed to meet Miju. He told her that he had watched Jerry Maguire. Although the movie was very bland, he felt very warm. He watched the movie and thought about himself. He cherished Miju's feelings for him. But he was worried about this feeling, so he repeatedly confirmed Miju's feelings. To soothe Seonjeom, Miju gently kissed him on the lips. They confirmed their feelings like that. They were both a little clumsy. Then they went to a restaurant for dinner, but they were both shy and avoided each other's eyes. After dinner, they went for a walk, but they were too shy to hold hands. Miju deliberately wanted to take Seonjeom back home. Seonjeom had to lie to her and say that he had moved to Younghwa's house. Then, to be closer to Miju, Seonjeom decided to move in with Younghwa. Younghwa happily agreed. Dan-ah received a photo of Yoon-bai, which was supposed to be placed in her office. But she didn't feel the excitement she thought she would. Then Yoon-bai saw Seonjeom's younger brother's photo next to the trash can and was astonished. She angrily asked Dan-ah, "How could you sign a contract with me and then throw it away immediately?" Dan-ah realized that Yoon-bai and her brother's relationship was actually that good. Meanwhile, Dan-ah had never felt the warmth of having siblings. In the evening, Dan-ah couldn't sleep again. Younghwa's words kept her up at night. So she put on her pajamas, took a bottle of wine, and went to Miju's door. After getting Miju's fried chicken from the delivery person, she wanted to break in. Miju ultimately couldn't bear to let her stand outside, so she opened the door for her. They talked about the issue of empathy. Dan-ah said, "Some people think my empathy is trash." That person is Younghwa. Miju affirmed that Dan-ah had a mental problem, because Dan-ah rarely put herself in other people's shoes to think. After drinking for a while, Dan-ah revealed the purpose of this trip. Miju and Younghwa were from the same social status, so she understood why Younghwa did that. At this time, Seonjeom sent a message wishing Miju good night. Miju excitedly said, "He's so cute." Dan-ah, on the side, looked at Miju's happy face and said something while drunk. Finally, she admitted her love for Younghwa. The next day, Dan-ah had a headache from drinking. Assistant Jung gave her a glass of honey water to sober up. But when she learned that it was Younghwa's honey, she immediately asked him to pour it out. She also asked when he could find a promising artist. She wanted to let Younghwa know that he wasn't the only one. Then she asked Assistant Jung to return the 500,000 won to Younghwa. Before leaving, the assistant took the jar of honey, but Dan-ah's eyes revealed a look of reluctance. Soon after, the assistant returned the honey to Younghwa. She also said, according to Dan-ah's instructions, "I hope you won't bother her anymore." She also asked Younghwa to delete Dan-ah's phone number. Younghwa unhappily complied and left angrily. Inside the track and field office, the coach coldly told Woo-sik, "I will do my best to avoid making you pay the contract breach penalty. But you have to sign the contract termination agreement." Next, he angrily said, "If you had endured another time, this wouldn't have happened today. Every time I see you, I think about my mistake." Woo-sik bowed his head and apologized. On the other hand, Seonjeom received news from Woo-sik, knowing that he had canceled the contract. But Seonjeom was still worried and went to see him. Unexpectedly, when Woo-sik saw him, it was like a mouse seeing a cat. He quickly ran away. But because his leg injury hadn't healed yet, Seonjeom quickly caught up to him. Woo-sik had decided to take the civil service exam. He sat on the ground, his face showing pain, and spoke words from his heart. Seonjeom asked him how he felt running today. Woo-sik choked and said, "It hurts and I'm tired. I can't imagine standing on the track like that again." What he feared most was that his running performance would no longer be as good as before. Seonjeom was speechless. He asked why Woo-sik was sitting in the middle of the road, worrying about that. Giving up without trying is cowardly. Seonjeom's eyes were determined as he told Woo-sik, "I hope I can be the one to help you get back up from the bottom." Then he reached out his hand to Woo-sik, urging him to stand up bravely. They went to dinner together. They chatted and laughed, and the atmosphere was very good. After dinner, Seonjeom returned home and made plans based on Woo-sik's physical condition. Meanwhile, Younghwa came home drunk. As soon as he entered, he clung to Seonjeom and called him brother. Seonjeom looked disgusted and pinched his nose. At this time, Miju called. He immediately went outside and took a walk with her. He told Miju that he was going to start working, but he wanted to keep the specifics of his work a secret for now. In this relationship, Miju learned to rethink her words and actions. Clearly, she missed Seonjeom, but she didn't want to admit it. Instead, she told him not to be so self-absorbed. Seon-jeom didn't blame her and took her hand proactively. They held hands, chatted, and walked forward. The next day, Seon-jeom was cleaning the refrigerator at home. Entrusted by Yonghwa to deliver something to school, he happened to meet Tae-wung. He didn't really remember who was in front of him, just hoping the other person wouldn't talk to him. Unexpectedly, Tae-wung wouldn't let go. He insisted on talking to him. Just then, they ran into an underground rapper who had a grudge against Tae-wung. Seon-jeom stepped aside, letting them argue, watching as if he were watching a play. The rapper grabbed Tae-wung and wanted to attack him. When Tae-wung's fans saw this, they stepped in to help. Seon-jeom took advantage of the fact that the rapper wasn't paying attention and rushed in to pull Tae-wung away and escape. On the way, they met Yonghwa. Seeing his younger brother being chased by a group of people, he instinctively ran after Seon-jeom. After running for a while, they finally shook off the fans. Yonghwa turned around and blamed Tae-wung. He had been bothered by him a lot. Unexpectedly, Tae-wung, who had a weak heart, had fainted. As soon as he woke up in the hospital, he already had the strength to argue with Yonghwa. But as soon as Yonghwa took out a piece of paper and asked Tae-wung to sign it for his friend, his attitude changed immediately. He laughed and talked cheerfully. On the way home, Yonghwa saw Mi-ju carrying heavy things and helped her bring them home. They sat down to chat. Mi-ju talked about the conflict between Yonghwa and Dan-ah. Yonghwa self-reflected and said that he wasn't mature or sophisticated. He lacked patience. Mi-ju thought both sides were at fault. Knowing how to accept your mistakes is what makes someone mature. The next day, Seon-jeom invited Mi-ju to join him in running a marathon. Mi-ju happily chose the 10-kilometer race, expressing her happiness. This time, she could wear the sneakers Seon-jeom gave her. As a gift in return, Mi-ju gave him the book, Learn to Love Yourself. Then they went to see Woo-sik together. The three of them went to the track and field team. Mi-ju sat on the side and recorded their training videos. Then, seeing Mi-ju and Woo-sik sitting together intimately watching a video, Seon-jeom seemed jealous and quickly squeezed between them. On the other side, Dan-ah discovered that Seon-jeom and Mi-ju had signed up for the marathon. She wanted to ask Mi-ju why she was participating. Then she saw Yonghwa come looking for her. A smile unconsciously appeared on her face. She thought he was here to apologize and took the opportunity to hand him a contract to sign. It stipulated that he should deliver the manuscript within 3 weeks. She also asked Yonghwa, "Do you like me?" Yonghwa replied, "I used to like you, but it's over now." Dan-ah felt very uncomfortable after hearing that. Soon after, there was another incident that made Dan-ah angry. Her father had given the marathon event to Myung-min. Her hard work was stolen, which made her very angry. She just wanted to shove the bouquet of flowers up his nose. It turned out that Myung-min was allergic to pollen. On the other hand, Mi-ju went to find Dan-ah. Assistant Jong greeted her. They chatted very happily. Mi-ju saw a wound on the assistant's hand and teased her, asking if it was Dan-ah's bad temper that caused it. The assistant showed her a photo of her beloved cat. At this time, Dan-ah slowly walked over. She had seen Mi-ju's name on the marathon list and told her to look for her to register. Dan-ah unconsciously confided in her, "In my world, I'm the weak one." She had to protect herself because she didn't know when she would lose the things that belonged to her. To some extent, Mi-ju saw her as very similar to her younger self, lonely and without a place to call home. Mi-ju advised Dan-ah not to live so tiredly and to treat herself better. Then, Mi-ju and Seon-jeom went to eat fried chicken and watch a movie together. Translating this movie was a recent job for Mi-ju. She had to challenge herself to surpass the original translation from years ago. She wanted to come up with a new translation that suited the development of the times. At this time, they began chatting about the future, the impact of artificial intelligence on different industries. Mi-ju sighed, "Maybe translation work will be banned." Seon-jeom said, "Change can happen at any time, but I will always be by your side." Mi-ju happily touched his head. Seon-jeom liked it when Mi-ju gently stroked him like this. He leaned against her shoulder. Seon-jeom looked at his girlfriend in front of him. The atmosphere was very ambiguous. After their date ended, Seon-jeom suddenly received a call from his father. He wanted to sponsor him to coach the track and field team. He wanted to form a more influential city-level team. Seon-jeom was very confused by his father's sudden actions. But his father was determined. He had negotiated with a veteran coach. Meanwhile, Yang Hua went to Dan A's office after receiving news from Assistant Zhang. Dan A didn't invite him to talk about his works. Instead, she wanted to watch his painting process. Yang Hua picked up his pen and began to paint. Dan A was displeased with his emotionless expression. Before, this man always smiled brightly when he faced her. Dan A couldn't contain the unease in her heart. Finally, she realized her admiration for Yang Hua and began to play tricks. She told him not to stop liking her. Yang Hua trembled slightly. "You have feelings for me?" Suddenly, Dan A directly grabbed his collar and kissed him on the lips. And she said, "I might like you." Unexpectedly, Yang Hua cried and asked, "Why are you treating me like this? Even my emotions are controlled by you. Who are you to tell me I can't stop liking you? You kissed me because I wanted to stop, not because you like me. You trap me, torment me, forbid me to laugh, and then tell me to laugh." Dan A felt confused, pointed at the door and said, "If you think I'm controlling you, then you can leave at any time." But when she saw him rushing towards the door, she panicked and quickly stopped him. Yang Hua excitedly told her not to play with his feelings anymore. He cried and said, "I've stopped. Why are you doing this? You've shaken me up." Dan A felt flustered and quickly comforted him. Then they went to a fried chicken shop. Dan A invited Yang Hua to lunch. At the same time, she really wanted to know if he still liked her. Yang Hua, having gained the initiative, took this opportunity to ask her to take him for a drive. Dan A seemed reluctant, but she had to agree. While doing cleaning work for Wu Sik, Xian Jiom also took the opportunity to train him, and he carefully prepared the necessary items for ice packs, helping Wu Sik's leg recover faster. He also set a goal for Wu Sik to strive for. He said that he would be doing a physical fitness test soon. In the evening, Dan A drove Yang Hua back home. Yang Hua said, "The thing I hate most about myself is that no matter what you do, I can't hate you. I can only like you." He turned and went upstairs. Dan A stared at his back and said, "I hate this feeling of confusion too." Then she met Xian Jiom as he returned. She dejectedly wished him and Mai Ju a smooth relationship, and then went to the bar to drink. At this time, Tae Won came to find Dan A. He had learned that she had been robbed of the charity marathon event by Myung Min. To soothe his sister's mood, he was willing to give Dan A the art gallery he owned. He also firmly said that he would stand by her. Dan A remembered the first time she met Tae Won. He was lying weakly in a hospital bed. The appearance of his never-met sister touched Tae Won deeply. Dan A said, "I just wanted to bring his tutor here. I stopped by because I saw he was about to die." But that tutor was the current mayor. However, the brother who lacked love was still moved to tears. Dan A said, "Before I acknowledge you as my brother, you're not allowed to die." Then Tae Won went to drink and called Assistant Zhang. The truth was that Tae Won was a crybaby. He was easily moved, but he wouldn't cry in front of Dan A. Otherwise, she would hate him even more. Tae Won didn't like Dan A and Yang Hua being together. He was afraid that this college student boyfriend would become Dan A's weakness. The assistant sighed, "Life is so unfair," and then drank to drown their sorrows together. The next day, Mi Ju was awakened by her alarm clock. She started practicing running to prepare for the marathon. Xian Jiom was also guiding Wu Sik to run on the track. Wu Sik was running faster and faster. At this time, young Il came to visit them. Wu Sik took him as a target and quickly rushed forward, jumping onto young Il. On the other side, Yun Bai went to find Mi Ju and said that she had discovered information about Mi Ju in her father's office and told her to be careful of him. He was always watching Xian Jiom. Mi Ju's mood turned bad. She started to immerse herself in work and didn't have time to get up early and exercise. Assistant Zhang relayed Yang Hua's message to Dan A. Dan A was very confused, not knowing how to deal with her emotions. The assistant spoke directly, "I don't support your feelings for him." So Dan A decided to meet and talk to Yang Hua. Unexpectedly, he arrogantly said, "Let's talk another time," and then quickly hung up. Dan A was so angry, her teeth were grinding. Meanwhile, Yang Hua was extremely pleased with himself. The next day, Xian Jiom asked Yang Hua to help him put on contact lenses. Yang Hua lifted his chin up. The atmosphere between them was strangely ambiguous. Yang Hua pretended to be serious and said, "I can see love in your eyes." Xian Jiom quickly interrupted his ridiculous imagination. At this time, Mai Ju secretly went to Yang Hua's house. Congressman Qi's surveillance made her worried. She asked Yonghua if he had seen anyone strange around his house. Yonghua took this opportunity to invite Maiju to have breakfast with him. He wanted her to help him with English tutoring. Today, she still hadn't seen Yonghua, so Dan-Ah took the initiative to find him and express her feelings. To her, he was like a comfort, but sometimes also a source of despair. It was despairing because before she only needed to look at his paintings. But the more she looked, the more she missed him. Yonghua, with confidence, held her in his arms and said, "Don't think about the past anymore. Enjoy the present with me." At this time, Dan-Ah frankly admitted that she liked Yonghua, making him very happy. He happily said, "Now you're mine." After the two parted ways, Dan-Ah returned to the office. The vice president reported Yunbai's itinerary to her. Dan-Ah immediately called her. Knowing that she was having a golf date with Congressman Key's friend, Dan-Ah immediately told Seon-jeom. Inside the golf course, Yunbai, under pressure from her father, had to guide his friend. At this time, Seon-jeom arrived and immediately pulled his sister away. He angrily told his father, "Don't use your children to satisfy your personal goals anymore. Why does your socializing need to involve a professional golfer? Be ashamed of yourself." After saying that, he pulled his sister away. The guests, therefore, left unhappy. In the evening, Congressman Key angrily went to find Mi-ju and questioned her if she was dating Seon-jeom. He also blamed her for ruining his son. "That obedient child doesn't listen to me anymore. That's why I was so embarrassed today." Mi-ju argued that Seon-jeom wasn't his property and emphasized that if he came to harass her again, she would call the police. After saying that, Mi-ju turned around and entered her house in fear. Being smeared and threatened made Mi-ju sit behind the door and cry. After returning to the office, Congressman Key found Seon-jeom waiting for him. He thought his son had come to beg for forgiveness. Unexpectedly, he was there to condemn him. Congressman Key was angry and mentioned three of Seon-jeom's weaknesses: the track and field team, Woo-sik, and Mi-ju. If he didn't obey anymore, he would punish Mi-ju. Seon-jeom said that Mi-ju wasn't a weakness but his strength. On the contrary, he was his weakness. "If you lose control again, I don't know what I will do to your political career." Then Seon-jeom ran to find Mi-ju. Seeing her cry, he was heartbroken. He hoped that whenever she was sick or tired, the first person she thought of was him. Mi-ju felt that when she had negative emotions, the best way was to adjust them herself. That way, she could get out of her bad mood. She didn't need to affect other people's emotions. At this time, Mi-ju felt like she was wearing ill-fitting shoes. She was choked with tears and wanted to give up on this relationship. Clearly, she hadn't done anything wrong. Why was she blamed and threatened by others? Seon-jeom wasn't happy with Mi-ju's decision. Her decision to break up now wasn't respecting herself. He suggested they give each other some time and that they should think carefully about this. Mi-ju agreed. Mi-ju returned to her room and remembered what Yunbai said. Yunbai said that her father used to make things difficult for her boyfriend too. He would punish him behind her, back in every way. Every time, he would run away, and she would chase after him to catch him. But Yunbai was certain that no matter how tired he was, Seon-jeom wouldn't run away. The next day, Seon-jeom was always absent-minded. To change the subject, Mi-ju went out for a run and, breaking her habit, she even washed vegetables and cooked rice. Mei told her to invite Seon-jeom to watch a movie and, by the way, resolve their conflict. Mi-ju remembered that she told Seon-jeom not to leave her, but now she had become the first person to run away. So, she felt very ashamed. On the other side, Yonghua took Dan-ah to a burger rice shop. Dan-ah was surprised that there wasn't anyone helping with the parking. The owner was also impolite and asked them to move their car. Seeing Dan-ah arguing with the shop owner, Yonghua quickly coaxed her. They parked smoothly and walked to the restaurant. Yonghua knew that Dan-ah's birthday was coming up, so he acted spoiled and wanted to celebrate it with her. But she avoided talking about her birthday. However, for Yonghua, it was her girlfriend's birthday, and she needed to celebrate it. Moreover, birthdays could promote feelings and win each other's hearts. Unexpectedly, Dan-ah felt it was simply a waste of time. Then she started to be bossy again. Yonghua, weak and vulnerable, was teased by her and almost cried. The next day, Mi-ju rushed into Dan-ah's office, wanting her to help her figure something out. Assuming that Dan-ah had a child, and that child loved a commoner, Dan-ah destroyed their relationship and warned them to break up. But they didn't break up. So what would Dan-ah do? Dan Ah helplessly replied, "Those parents have a lot of free time." Then she told Mai Ju, "Just wait. That parent will be busy with something else soon, so you don't need to worry." It turned out that Congressman Key had been busy running for office recently. His opponent, Congressman No, had a good reputation in the party. And the people also hoped for new faces to be elected as national representatives. The election was going on in full swing, while Mrs. Ji Woo was still outside filming. Her assistant was worried that after she became the First Lady, she would leave the entertainment industry. And then he would be out of a job. Mrs. Ji Woo was speechless after hearing that. She said, "I abandoned my children and worked hard to achieve this. It wasn't because of the title of this or that person's wife. I want to be myself and be responsible for my own life." On the other hand, Dan Ah drove to the coffee shop. She accidentally saw Yi Jun looking at Yonghua, leaving with a strange expression. Her sixth sense told her something was wrong. So she directly asked Yi Jun, "Do you like Yonghua?" Yi Jun didn't answer. He asked back, "Why are you the heiress?" joking with the student. His words revealed disapproval of this relationship. But after Dan Ah left, his expression became very panicked. On the other side, Mi Ju was very happy because she was translating the movie starring Mrs. Ji Woo. But Mei was very worried. He was afraid that Congressman Key would make a fuss after he found out. He said, "You can't separate your work from your private life." Hearing that, Mi Ju angrily left, but she quickly came back. She sincerely apologized to Mei. She also sighed, "I can only quickly reconcile with you when I'm angry with you." Because she wanted to be good friends with Mei for life. Before, when she had an argument with her ex-boyfriend, she would immediately be abandoned the next day. So, this time, she had experience. When they had problems, she would be the first one to suggest breaking up. She also negatively concluded, "My fate is to be abandoned." But Mei said, "Seon Jeom won't be like those scumbags." Mi Ju knew this in her heart, but her love for Seon Jeom wasn't deep enough to endure everything. Seon Jeom was busy preparing Woo Sik's resume and sending it to some track and field teams. In a meeting with the head of a semi-professional team, the person in charge was curious why Seon Jeom had abandoned his powerful background to support a whistleblower. Even if you try harder, no team will be willing to accept Woo Sik. Seon Jeom only laughed after hearing that. At this time, he missed Mi Ju very much and went to wait outside her house. But when Mai Ju returned, he just hid on the side and secretly watched her. Then he went to watch a movie alone. He waited until the translator's name appeared at the end of the movie. Seeing him so lonely was very pitiful. He missed his sweet dates with Mi Ju. Today, the vice president discovered that Yoon Bai wasn't doing well. He suspected that she had Yip syndrome. It's a condition of involuntary movements that affect the hand or wrist. Dan Ah quickly learned about the news. Under her questioning, Yoon Bai collapsed and cried in distress. Dan Ah insisted on taking her to see a doctor. The vice president helplessly said, "You should express your request tactfully." On the other hand, Yonghua was preparing for Dan Ah's birthday party. Yi Jun helped him on the side and asked him, "Have you climbed up to Rapunzel's tower? You'll be blinded by the witch eventually." Meanwhile, Tae Wong, after learning that Yonghua was going to celebrate his sister's birthday, quickly ran away from the team leader. He went to the coffee shop to question Yonghua about why he was taking the initiative. At this time, Yonghua finally knew that this person was Dan Ah's brother. They had a conflict. Yi Chan on the side recognized his idol and rushed in to stop his brother. He was not allowed to touch his idol. Unexpectedly, Tae Wong accidentally pushed the two brothers down. This made Yonghua angry. Assistant Jeong also joined the fight. The four men spun around in a circle. Seon Jeom and Mai Ju also came to the coffee shop to help. The two of them stood silently looking at each other, completely indifferent to the chaos of the fight next to them. After Dan Ah arrived, she only saw them striking strange poses. She was helpless and didn't know what to do. Suddenly, Mei came over and patted Mai Ju on the shoulder, causing her to jump and accidentally set off the ribbon. This led to a chain reaction. The coffee shop owner was terrified and dropped the love cake to the ground. The car trunk also opened. Dan Ah didn't seem happy. Then Mi Ju and Seon Jeom cleaned up the street together. Seon Jeom asked her, "You knew I was coming, but you still came?" Mi Ju remained silent. Inside the shop, Tae Wong told Yonghua, "Today isn't Dan Ah's real birthday. My father, in order to make his son from his second wife the eldest, forged Dan Ah's birth certificate." At this time, Seon-jeom received a notification from the track and field team and rushed over to the school. It turned out that a female team member named Soo-bin had a conflict with her classmate. Her classmate and their parents wouldn't forgive her, forcing Soo-bin's parents to apologize. Seon-jeom decided to find Soo-bin to talk to her, but he waited from day to night, and she still didn't appear. At the pharmacy, Mi-ju went to buy medicine and happened to meet Soo-bin. Soo-bin said that she had accidentally pushed her classmate, Chang Seo, down the stairs. The reason was that he had called Seon-jeom a violent athlete. So, they got into an argument. Mi-ju's sense of justice exploded. She planned to go find Chang Seo's parents with Soo-bin to reason with them. Soon after, Soo-bin went to find Chang Seop's mother. She said, "I live with my aunt, and she's busy. She can't come to apologize." Chang Seop's mother angrily scolded Soo-bin and then turned to leave. Unexpectedly, Mi-ju picked up a brick and rushed over, pretending to want to smash the car to threaten her to reconcile with Soo-bin. Suddenly, Chang Seop rushed out of the house, standing in front of his mother. He explained that he liked Soo-bin and was jealous because he saw her being close to Seon-jeom. Then he told his mother not to bully the girl he likes. Mi-ju saw this and smiled. In the evening, Mi-ju took Soo-bin back home. On her way back, she ran into Seon-jeom. She panicked and turned to run away. Seon-jeom quickly chased after her and hugged her tightly from behind. He begged her not to break up with him. Mi-ju was heartbroken when she saw his sorrowful appearance. She turned around and hugged him. Sitting in the car, they finally reconciled. Seon-jeom assured her that he would clear all obstacles on their path to love. Mi-ju shyly asked him, "Do you want to come to my house and eat instant noodles?" She made a suggestive hint, allowing Seon-jeom to spend the night at her house. Back at home, they leaned against the bed and sat beside each other, chatting happily. After chatting for a while, the atmosphere suddenly became quiet. Mi-ju proactively said, "Let's kiss." Seon-jeom teased her and sweetly kissed her on the lips. The next day, Congressman Ki suddenly appeared in front of Mrs. Ji-woo and mentioned Seon-jeom causing a commotion at the golf course. But she didn't care. She said, "My son is still healthy and doing well, and he's still causing trouble." In her eyes, she always focused on her career and paid little attention to her children. Now that her children were grown up, she wouldn't interfere with their lives anymore. However, Congressman Ki wanted his wife to cooperate with his schedule and film less. Mrs. Ji-woo immediately retorted, "I am in charge of my own life, but you always treat me as a prop to achieve the peak of your career. If you don't like the way I look, why don't you get a divorce?" Congressman Ki was so angry, he wanted to hit someone, but he didn't dare to. He just lightly slapped his wife a few times. He told her to remember this. Getting a divorce isn't something you alone can decide. On the other hand, Mi-ju started researching the script for the movie starring Mrs. Ji-woo, preparing for her translation work. At this time, Dan-ah came to Mi-ju's house, wanting to learn how to reconcile with her boyfriend. Mi-ju suggested that she apologize directly. After hesitating for a while, Dan-ah seemed to agree, and, following Mi-ju, got into the car and went to Yonghwa's house in the beekeeping area. Because Yonghwa had unfinished work, Mi-ju and Dan-ah first went to a nearby coffee shop to wait. Mi-ju asked why she had brought her here. Dan-ah sadly said, "Someone is watching me. So Mi-ju being here is to cover up the relationship between me and Yonghwa." Then Dan-ah and Yonghwa went for a walk by the beach. Dan-ah intentionally said, "I have nowhere to stay tonight." Sure enough, Yonghwa had the wrong idea and couldn't stop smiling. At this time, Seon-jeom was negotiating with the vice president. She informed him that Yoon-bi had yips, and she also invited him to their company to be their representative and take care of the athletes. It would also be good for Yoon-bi's future development. Seon-jeom said that he needed to consider it. On the other hand, Myung-min learned from a private investigator that Dan-ah was intimate with a woman. Immediately, his expression changed from serious to sad. He quickly ran to his father's hospital bed. He held his hand to show respect and love for his father. After a while, Tae-won ran over and grabbed his father's hand, making him unhappy. After they both walked out of the hospital room, Myung-min threatened Tae-won. "If you use the shares in your hands to support Dan-ah, then your status as an illegitimate child will be exposed. Your idol career will be destroyed." Hearing this, Tae-won's face turned very ugly. Dan-ah allowed Yonghwa to stay in the same room as her, but the prerequisite was that he couldn't touch her. In another room, Mi Ju wanted Seonjeom to take a picture and send it to her. But the angle and posture of his photos were very strange. Mi Ju had to pose as a model, and then ask him to take the photo again. In Dan Ah's room, Yonghwa was gradually moving closer to Dan Ah, wanting her to shift her focus from work to him. Then he playfully invited her to go for a walk. Dan Ah was helpless and finally had to give in. Beside the beach, Yonghwa affectionately said, "My wish is to never break up with Dan Ah. I hope you can help me achieve that." In the evening, Yonghwa hugged the portrait of Dan Ah and slept soundly on the bed. Dan Ah sat beside him and wished that time could stop at this moment. Suddenly, he woke up and pulled her into his arms. He gently patted her back. So, Dan Ah fell asleep in Yonghwa's safe embrace. The next day, Yonghwa saw Dan Ah and Mi Ju off. Suddenly, Dan Ah wanted to do a blood test with Yonghwa. What if we have the same bloodline? That would be tragic. Mi Ju and Yonghwa looked at each other speechless. Soon, Dan Ah breathed a sigh of relief when she saw the DNA test report. She wasn't related to Yonghwa. At this time, she saw the news on the hot search. An idol was an illegitimate child. Although it didn't reveal who the idol was, Dan Ah was still very worried. If this issue was revealed, the company's image would be affected. She wanted to maintain the stability of the corporation. At the same time, a reporter took photos of Yoon Bai playing golf with Congressman No, intending to label her as a homewrecker. And this Congressman No was a rival of Congressman Keyes. The night before the charity marathon, Congressman Key asked Seonjeom to meet him the next day. The next day, the starting gun fired, and Mi Ju began a long journey with the entire team. Yonghwa saw that Dan Ah's stamina wasn't good enough, so he carried her into the tent. Dan Ah refused to go to the hospital. She had similar symptoms to Tae Woong, arrhythmia. Yonghwa was very worried. On the other side, Congressman Key had spoken firmly. He would accept Woo-sik into his track and field team and have Seonjeom be their representative. The condition was that he had to apologize to Chairman SEO for his embarrassing actions at the golf course. Unexpectedly, after Chairman SEO arrived, he also mentioned the idea of the two families becoming in-laws. He wanted him to marry Dan Ah. Seonjeom understood his father's petty motives. He wanted to refuse, but his father wouldn't agree. He didn't care who his son was in love with, but the only possible marriage partner was Dan Ah. It was good for his life. Moreover, Congressman Key also threatened him with Woo-sik. If he disappears, it'll be your fault. Be obedient before I lose my patience. At this time, Mi Ju didn't have anyone beside her, but she continued to run forward. She thought about her diligence in studying in the past, the pain of being criticized by her teachers after being bullied, the humiliation of being paid off by the other party's parents to shut her up. Luckily, she still had Seonjeom. So, she would continue running to reach the finish line and see him. When they met at the finish line, they were both very touched. No matter how much misfortune they faced, as long as they healed each other, everything could be easily resolved. They touched fingertips, like a classic scene in a science fiction movie. They celebrated their first finish line. Then, they both went to a restaurant. Seonjeom frankly said, "My father is forcing me to marry Dan Ah. But I will never let Mi Ju suffer." On the other hand, Assistant Jong drove Dan Ah and Yonghwa back home. The couple kept arguing in the car, which made the single assistant feel very embarrassed. Dan Ah looked at Yonghwa's figure going upstairs and mumbled, "How do I end this relationship?" After all, she would never be able to get what she liked, because her father would always interfere. The assistant knew that she was actually afraid that Yonghwa would be hurt. Seonjeom and Mi Ju just walked out of the restaurant when Seonjeom received a call from Dan Ah. He immediately took Mi Ju to the company. It turned out that Dan Ah's father was going to arrange a wedding for her and Seonjeom. Dan Ah had no choice but to find the people involved and negotiate a solution. Seonjeom decided to use a delaying tactic. Then, Mi Ju reminded Dan Ah to tell Yonghwa about this too. She also demanded that Dan Ah not call Seonjeom in the middle of the night anymore. Back at home, Mi Ju continued to work on translating the movie. Meanwhile, Seonjeom was filling out a job application for a job agency. Yonghwa advised him to use his handsome face more. It would be best to paste a big photo of himself. The next day, at Yonghwa's suggestion, Seonjeom went to find Mi Ju to borrow a gas stove. He planned to have an outdoor barbecue party. Yonghwa, seeing the close relationship between Mi Ju and Seonjeom, was very jealous. He lied to Dan Ah and said that he had finished the painting. He invited her to his house for a party. Then, the two men went to the supermarket to buy groceries. Seeing that Sion Jeom bought a lot of food, Yang Hua was completely overwhelmed. Normal people couldn't eat that much. Soon, the smell of barbecue wafted from the rooftop. Dan Ah discovered that Yang Hua had lied to her. She was angry and wanted to use violence. She didn't allow others to joke with her about work. It took a lot of effort to stop her. Unexpectedly, while eating, Yang Hua only ate pork belly. Sion Jeom quickly reminded him, "You have to know how to take care of a girl when she's eating." Yang Hua said, "Pork belly tastes better when you wrap it yourself. Because everyone's taste is different." Dan Ah was so angry that she almost poured wine on him. While chatting, they discovered that Dan Ah couldn't remember Sion Jeom's name. She could only say his last name and Yang Hua's nickname. The only name she could remember was Mi Ju's. Mi Ju teased her, "It's really touching that you're facing Dan Ah like this." After the BBQ party ended, they went outside and saw Mei playing on the slide. Behind her, assistant Zhang was holding a love balloon. It turned out that on the day, Yang Hua was preparing a surprise birthday for Dan Ah. The assistant had fallen in love with Mei at first sight. So, he boldly chased after her, asking if she was single. Like that, the two of them got together smoothly. Their atmosphere made Dan Ah feel chills. Mei even took the excuse that the assistant was too kind and asked Dan Ah to treat his boyfriend. Well, Dan Ah was speechless. After they all parted ways, Yang Hua took Dan Ah home. On the way, he gave her a pair of sneakers. In his eyes, she was Rapunzel. But at this moment, Dan Ah was standing under the streetlight. This image was much more beautiful than he imagined. He hoped that Dan Ah would just stand still and simply live her own life. He would look at her and slowly approach her. The next day, Mei excitedly informed Mi Ju to come to the company. It turned out that Mrs. Ji Woo had suddenly come to visit. Mi Ju didn't have time to put on makeup. Then she quickly put on a hat and sunglasses and rushed over. Mei took off her sunglasses and pushed her forward. Mrs. Ji Woo was friendly and told Mi Ju and Sion Jeom to send a coffee truck to her film set together. But she suddenly remembered that her son was unemployed. Mi Ju quickly said, "Sion Jeom isn't unemployed. He's the representative for the athletes now." That night, Mi Ju looked at Mrs. Ji Woo's signature and was filled with motivation. She started to translate again. The next day, Mei told Mi Ju, "There are rumors online that Congressman No is having an affair with Yoon Bai." So, Mi Ju immediately contacted Sion Jeom to meet up. She also sent a message to Yoon Bai, saying that she could come to talk to her anytime. On the other hand, Sion Jeom received a call from his mother. She asked him to comfort Yoon Bai. Then, Sion Jeom handed over his files to Dan Ah's company. After he was done, he went to Mi Ju's house. Soon after, Yoon Bai also arrived. She was very worried because her boyfriend wasn't answering his phone. She didn't know where he was. Under Mi Ju and Sion Jeom's comfort, she quickly calmed down and went to see her father to clarify the scandal with Congressman number 7. Congressman Key trusted his daughter. He also disliked that man very much. He thought that he was the one who had dragged him into this. He told his daughter, "Don't worry, I'll take care of it." However, due to his election campaign, Congressman Key hadn't slept for many days. Finally, he cried tiredly in front of his assistant. On the other hand, Dan Ah found Yoon Bai on the golf course. After talking to her, Dan Ah went to Yang Hua's house to check the painting he had finished. Unexpectedly, she discovered that she was also in it. Through the painting, Yang Hua passionately expressed his love. Dan Ah pushed him forcefully. She shyly said, "How can you let people see me at the exhibition? I'd be so embarrassed." At this time, she received a phone call. Her expression changed immediately. She rushed to the hospital. Her father was dying. He smiled and said, "I've loved Dan Ah so much." Soon after, he passed away. Young Min didn't even have time to grieve before he rushed to get promoted. He ignored Dan Ah's request to stay with her father. Not long after, Yang Hua also learned about the death of Dan Ah's father and gave her a warm hug. But soon after, Dan Ah asked him to forget about her, because she couldn't give him a happy ending. They parted ways like that. On the other hand, Mi Ju was enjoying the seafood noodles Sion Jeom made. The flavor reminded her of the restaurant she had visited when she traveled abroad. They both made plans to travel together next time. On the other hand, when Congressman Key learned about Chairman Seo's death, he was very worried. He didn't know what would happen to the marriage between the two families. Regarding the scandal between Yoon Bai and Congressman No, he decided not to address it. He wanted to take advantage of the scandal to lower Congressman No's number of votes. His assistant was very surprised by this decision. After all, he had promised Yoon Bai that he would take care of it. Not long after, the assistant went to find Seon-gyum and said that he had resigned. "I don't want to live this filthy life anymore." It turned out that the scandal was released by Congressman Ki. His goal was to bring down his opponent. He also told Seon-gyum that his mother wanted to divorce his father. "But it'll never happen because my father already had precautions in place." Then, Mi-ju made a large table of food to comfort Seon-gyum. She also hugged him and gently said, "You must tell Yoon Bai. If she's sad, hug her to comfort her like you hug me." So very quickly, Yoon Bai learned that her father had used her. Seon-gyum even told her mother about it. Today, Mrs. Ji-woo had to fly to America because she had an important meeting. However, while she had the opportunity to pursue her career again, her children, who were hurt now, needed her. After forcing her manager to give her a break, she rushed to deal with the family conflict. She angrily went to see her husband and asked him to file for divorce. But Congressman Ki was only worried that his father-in-law would learn about this and cut off his campaign funds. So he immediately lowered himself and apologized to his wife. But Mrs. Ji-woo was determined to get a divorce. The next day, Young-hwa delivered the painting to Dan-ah. He asked her to keep it until he no longer loved her. Suddenly, tears ran down Dan-ah's cheeks. Then she burst into tears. Young-hwa hugged her and wished her a long life. He said goodbye to his first love. Arriving home, Young-hwa hugged Seon-gyum, remembering his love for Dan-ah, remembering his dream of never breaking up with Dan-ah. He sorrowfully burst into tears. Dan-ah went to the bar to drink. Mi-ju was asked by assistant Jong to find Dan-ah to talk to her. She let Dan-ah lean on her shoulder. The next day, Young-hwa received a comforting gift from Seon-gyum. He smiled and thanked him. He also said, "Even if one day my impression of Dan-ah fades, she will still be in my heart." After they parted ways, Dan-ah started to immerse herself in her work. She also asked Tae-wung to help her with tomorrow's shareholder meeting. She also allowed Tae-wung to be her brother forever. Tae-wung wanted to give her a hug to thank her, but Dan-ah avoided him and acted like she disliked it. Finally, Dan-ah put on the shoes Young-hwa had given her. She went to the headquarters for the first time as the vice president. Inside the art gallery, Dan-ah saw Young-hwa's work. The girl in purple shoes in the painting was her. She whispered, "I miss you so much." At this time, Young-hwa came up from behind and asked her what she thought of the painting. Dan-ah wasn't like she used to be. She didn't criticize his paintings for being dark and causing discomfort. Instead, she praised him for having a shining soul. She also decided to celebrate her birthday today. On the other hand, Yoon Bai had given her mother a bouquet of flowers, congratulating her on the successful divorce. After this, Yoon Bai wanted to take time for herself and go for a walk somewhere. She wanted to experience a simple and peaceful life. In the following days, Seon-gyum officially became the representative. Mi-ju's career also had good results. The movie she translated was well received by foreign audiences, which gave her a lot of motivation. Seon-gyum and Mi-ju's feelings grew stronger. In the warm sunlight, Seon-gyum suddenly told her, "I love you," and ran away in embarrassment. After that, the group of four often gathered together. They laughed and raised their glasses to celebrate a brighter tomorrow. Young-hwa was also constantly striving to become a man suitable for Dan-ah. And Dan-ah, because of being with Young-hwa, was no longer lonely. In the end, everyone had a happy ending. Woo-sik, thanks to Seon-gyum's introduction, also joined Dan-ah's company. After winning the championship, he hung the medal around his grandmother's neck. Mrs. Ji-woo received a coffee truck sent by Seon-gyum and Mi-ju. Tae-wung's idol career flourished. Mei and assistant Jong happily kissed, which was seen by the staff. Seon-gyum occasionally went fishing with his father, who had failed in his election campaign. Dan-ah and Mi-ju became best friends. In the cinema, Congressman Ki appeared with a bouquet of flowers. Mrs. Ji-woo accepted it. They sat next to their daughter and watched a movie together. All the actors of the movie also appeared there. The movie, Running On, has come to an end. Thank you for watching my video. What are your thoughts? Leave a comment below with your thoughts. See you in tomorrow's video.